Test, 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 test. Gonna test the audio, gonna play a little clip here.
Each character in Dark Souls 1 feels like they have some kind
Okay, just waiting for the playback. Test, 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 test. Gonna test the audio, gonna play a little clip here. Oh no, it's looping.
Each character in Dark Souls 1 feels like they have
Okay, that's fine. There we go. Cool. There we go. Okay, hi everybody. Hope you guys are doing okay. Sorry, let me just check in with you real quick. I am so sorry to hear that you went through all that. That is incredibly intense. Jesus, you're wearing a cage? 23 screws. My God. I hope you're okay. You must be in some amount of pain or discomfort. I hope it's manageable. Jesus. Did something happen? Was this an injury that happened suddenly? Or was this something that you've been planning for a while? Either way, that's really intense. Hope that you're okay. Hope that your family is with you. If you find some enjoyment from the stream, then I'm glad that it's available for you. But also, yeah, obviously, please rest, take care of yourself, stay connected with your loved ones. Don't feel any kind of obligation whatsoever to respond or whatnot. You do what you need to do. Please take care of yourself. That's very important. I had a surgery a few years ago, and it wasn't nearly as intense as what you went through, it sounds like, but man, like, I needed the support, I needed the patience for people, or I wouldn't have gotten through it, man. It's a lot. So please, yeah. I hope everything turns out okay. Saria says, oh no, this has been planned for a while. It's for your scoliosis. Oh, okay, gotcha. So it is something that you were kind of planning around. That at least is good to hear. And like having to deal with all of that just out of the blue, it's hard enough to deal with it at all, but let alone if it was something sudden and unprovoked like an injury. But yeah, I guess congratulations are in order as well. Like, it must have been scary to face that and to go in. Like, getting under the knife for any reason, for a surgery is kind of a brain racking, is that the right expression? Like, it can be a very traumatic thing, a very scary thing. Even if it seems like everything's going to go well, you never know what's going to happen, right? So, respect, congratulations. I hope that it all works out as you were expecting. And hopefully you got somebody to help cover your shifts on the farm for a little while, right? Like, they're gonna be they're not gonna send you out tomorrow to go like chase down the horses and collect eggs and stuff like that. The little pig that you shared was so cute. Are they a new arrival, so to speak? It looks like they're like just a little piglet, right? Yeah, thank you for not only stopping by, but also being here earlier than I was after recovering from basically becoming a cyborg, basically evolving into to an enhanced machine organism. I appreciate you taking the time out of that to come check in. I say that in solidarity because I also have a metal rod in my leg with screws. So as far as I'm concerned, we're both cyborgs now. So you're a Delta now, exactly. Yes. Embraced by the glorious machine. Sorry, says I was worried I wouldn't be awake because I went in at 12 p.m. I'm going to sleep from then until around 5 and then fell asleep again and I'm up again. Also, yes, my big sister is here. Okay, good. I'm very, very glad to hear that. It's important that you have people that you love, that you're close to help take care of you. So very, very glad to hear you made it out okay. So as for tonight, well, nothing tonight is going to be that intense, I don't think. We're just going to be going over some more Dark Souls 2 stuff as usual. So let me just do a little brief intro for folks who are new, or just to kind of catch everybody up to where we're at. And of course, as always, feel free to interrupt or chime in or ask any questions or whatnot. So welcome to folks who are new to the stream. Thank you so much for checking this out. And for returning folks, welcome as well. It's really great to connect with you guys. Hope everybody's been doing well, having good stuff, having successful surgeries, as the case may be. So in our continuing series discussing Dark Souls 2, today we're going to be returning to our discussion of the what I consider to be the original Dark Souls 2 critique. So this is a video by Matthewmatosis. It's been out for a while now. 11 years ago this came out, and I want to talk about it because, well, first I want to say that, like, I was a very different person 11 years ago. I don't think the version of myself from 11 years ago would necessarily get along with my today self, and I think the opposite is true as well. I think we just irritate the shit out of each other, honestly. So I want to be clear, people change a lot over the course of a decade. So I'm not assuming that Matthew still holds any of his beliefs to be true in this. This is not a takedown. This is not some kind of a debunking or anything like that. And although I will get pretty passionate about a few things, like I disagree pretty strongly with a lot of what he says, the point of this is not to just shit on somebody for something they did 10 years ago. The point is that the way that people talk about Dark Souls 2 today is still kind of similar to the way Matthew introduced the topic, so to speak, 2 years ago. In other words, if you look at videos from people like Mahler, who's not quite as recent, but Feeble King, who's more recent, and folks like him, it seems to me that they were, if not inspired by Matthew's original work, that they have kind of adopted a similar style and in some cases copy-pasted some of the points, so to speak. And so rather than just saying, like, Matthew's dumb and I'm super smart and cool, what I want to do is go through and just listen to what he's saying and consider what is the alternate interpretation. So he's going to start talking here about how he thinks characters are misrepresented, or like NPCs are not as well developed and not as deep and not as compelling in Dark Souls 2 compared to 1. I'd like to hear what he's saying and then see if his claims hold up, and then also talk about whether or not Dark Souls 2 is a quote-unquote good sequel in the way that it takes ideas, concepts, archetypes, whatever, from Dark Souls 1 and tries to evolve and iterate on it. So Dark Souls 1 has X number of NPCs, they have this particular role in the story, they do this particular sort of thing over the course of the game. How does Dark Souls 2 inherit that and look at that and say, okay, let's build on this? Or does it even build on it at all? Is it just a copy-paste? Is it just a watering down? Or is it like an evolution? And so we're going to go through and listen to what he says, see if it still holds up today. Again, not as a direct takedown of him, but more as a way of saying, like, what about the discourse around Dark Souls 2 has changed over the past 10 years? What hasn't? What has stayed the same? And based on our recent playthrough of the game, what can we learn from this discussion about whether or not Dark Souls 2 is not only just a good game, but whether it's a good sequel, like whether it honors or respects the legacy of 1. That's one of the major criticisms that I hear people say about Dark Souls 2, is that it's a good game, but it's not a good Dark Souls game, right? They feel like it strayed too far away from the, I guess you could say strictures, or you could say archetypes, or whatever the moral standards fucking Dark Souls 1 implemented. They feel like Dark Souls 2 kind of betrayed that and went too far away. And so I want to keep that in mind and listen for that sort of thing as we go. So that being said, let me catch up on chat. Saria says, as for tonight, we're summoning the souls of the damned and talking about Dark Souls 2. Yes, so I got the pentagram, I got the blood over here. Let me see, I just need a couple of candles. So yeah, when my DoorDash arrives, I'll disappear for 5 minutes and I'll come back. I actually got this little Bluetooth speaker that I can hook up for the demonic chanting. The candles would go above the computer right there. Okay, so we should be all set by the time we get back. Sorry says, I understand completely where you're coming from. People tend to be shocked when I talk about the respect and love I have for, like, MatPat. Oh, interesting. But only disagree with his theories. He's an awesome person. That's really good to hear. Yeah, sometimes I think it's easy to let the line between person and like persona disturbing the peace. It's sometimes difficult to figure out, like, where somebody's internet persona ends and where their actual human self begins, and how much of themselves they even want to put onto the internet and represent themselves with. Are they playing a character or not? And to what extent does the way that they represent themselves online actually reflect their true self? And I don't think that anybody is under any obligation necessarily to just be authentic all the time. I think it's fine if you want to play a character. I mean, like, not to deceive people, but, you know, like, if I want to make a character that's satirical and like I'm overly nitpicky, but I'm doing it to kind of poke fun at people who are overly nitpicky, I think that's fine, right? But generally speaking, I think that people do form these like parasocial connections, one way or another, with the people that they listen to. And I think something in your brain when you listen to somebody like Matthewmatosis or like Game Grumps or Zero Punctuation, Yahtzee, just I'm trying to think of other YouTube, the video game Donkey who I listen to, you start to develop this sort of idea that you can quote unquote trust them to a certain extent, right? Like you hear their voice, you find that their opinions validate yours, and over time you build this sort of like parasocial connection. But it's important to remember that regardless of your impressions, the person behind all of that is still a real human being. So whether you like or dislike their takes, and whether you are like hateful or loving towards their persona, keeping in mind how that affects their real self as well is really important. That's great. In other words, this is all just me trying to say that I think you can have a fiery, passionate, even like bitter disagreement with somebody's opinions, but if you can still like really appreciate them genuinely as a person, that's awesome. Right? And unfortunately, the opposite is true. As happened with me and my previous partner, we're like huge JonTron fans. And then I'm sure you already know what happened with all that, not to get into the drama, but that's sort of the opposite, right? Where you feel a sense of closeness and connection parasocially with this person's opinions or style of humor, entertainment, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, it's just like, it's very hard to go back and listen to that stuff because of what you now know about the person. Some people say, hey man, death of the author, man, just enjoy the art, just separate it from the artist. I'm like, I'm fucking trying. I genuinely tried, but I can't, because in the back of my head, every time I like hear a joke, I'm like, I understand where this joke is coming from. Now I get the context for this, and it's just like unfortunate. I mean, not to dig up more 8-year-old-ish drama. This is secretly this is an old internet lore channel, and I'm just slowly revealing that. Let's see. Sorry says, wow, I haven't heard of JonTron in so long. Yeah, I am sorry slightly to well, I have no idea how he's doing. Hopefully, look, I've said a bunch of edgy, stupid shit on the internet, like especially when I was younger, and I still have edgy opinions about things, and people can change and people can have those opinions improve. Like, it's not the end of the world per se. So hopefully he got, it sounded like he was kind of being courted by people like Sargon of Akkad and like those weird manosphere, alt-right, Gamergate type YouTubers. It's possible that they just kind of like poisoned his, what's the expression for it? Like, I don't even know what the colloquialism is, but like they kind of drew him in and warped his perception, and then he was able to break out of it. That's what I hope. I had to kind of just stop listening to him for a while because I really didn't appreciate some of the stuff that he was saying. But I think everybody deserves a redemption arc, at least a shot at one. We're talking about this, about like the Naruto community stuff. I don't want anybody to spend the rest of their life wearing a dunce cap necessarily. I want people to get along. I want people to, because like, it's an incredible opportunity when somebody who has a big platform makes a mistake and then comes forward and says, oops, sorry about that. I think people underestimate how powerful it can be, not just to like correct a misconception or an error, but just like, I think especially for men, maybe that's a little misandrous or whatever, but I think especially for men, it's who are popular in public. It's really hard to just come forward and just say, I'm sorry. And I think men in general, we should get better at admitting that we're wrong about things and then being willing to acknowledge that. Even the act of doing it, regardless of what you're talking about, sends a very powerful signal to other men, and it makes other men feel more safe, like they can do that themselves without their whole fucking image crumbling around them. So, yeah, even if he wasn't specific, he just showed up and said, my bad, that in and of itself would, I think, be very useful. Just as one more drop in the bucket of like, hey, men, it's okay to actually admit when you're wrong about things. You don't have to just be stoic all the time. But anyway, none of this is directly related to Dark Souls, but it is kind of interesting because we have, whether we're talking about Noodles with the Naruto streams, or talking about Feeble King with some or similar folks with the Dark Souls 2 stuff, we do have quite a overlap on this channel of folks with edgy opinions who are very entrenched in them, as far as I can tell, and it's tough. Like, once you start to dig that trench, how do you recalibrate? How do you move on? How do you, if you do even start to think that you might be mistaken about something, how do you like repair that? It's really, really hard. And I have 72 subscribers now, I think, on my channel. And when I close my eyes and I try to picture, like, even, I don't know, 50 people sitting in a room listening to what I say, it freaks me out, man. It's like, it in a good way. It's kind of weird to think of that many people, like, listening and hinging on your words, and, like, potentially, what's really scary is the idea that I might actually change anybody's mind about anything, because it's really kind of surreal to think that I might say something that then makes something in somebody else's brain change. And if I get it wrong, then what does that mean? Like, what are the knock-on effects of that going to be, right? It's a little weird. And so I take that from the 50 lovely people that I have on this channel, and then I try to imagine what it would be like to have like 10 million people. Like, every little thing you say goes out to 10 million people, and what do you fucking do if you say something that that is wrong in that context? I mean, the obvious easy answer is you own up, you take responsibility, but I don't even think our brains can really process the concept of 10 million people listening concurrently to what you do. We live in an age of kind of unprecedented access to mass amounts of human brains, and so it's just like uncharted territory, I think, for a lot of us. Anyway, Dark Souls 2. Honestly, I look forward to these little catch-up sessions before the stream. Appreciate you giving me my opportunity to rant a little bit. But yeah, so with all that being said, we're gonna jump right into the critique response. We are picking up from around the 1440 minute, or I think 1420 mark, where we left off last time. And we're going to be starting off talking first and foremost about the characters, I think. And one of the things that he brings up pretty early on is the NPCs. So we got a list of NPCs here in Dark Souls 1 versus Dark Souls 2. We're going to just have a listen and see what he has to say. Try to keep in mind that I'm very passionate about this, so I'm going to get worked up a little bit. But nothing is intended as a personal attack. This is all just in the spirit of like better understanding the game. Hopefully that comes across. Saria says, that's relatable, but I think you're going about things perfectly. Oh, thank you. You have this way of saying things, but you always make sure to clarify that, hey, double check me, and that's powerful in my opinion. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. I mean, these, parasocial though it might be, all these videos on the stream are intended as part of a conversation. And so I want to learn from you guys as much as I want to share things and pontificate about my own opinions. Yes, I want everybody to know how cool and awesome everything I say is. But more to the point, I just want to like participate in a conversation, even if it's a conversation that started and ended 10 years ago. So I hope that you guys will let me know if I make a mistake, or if there's just another viewpoint that I haven't considered or whatever else, because yeah, I mean, you guys are smart, you're clever, you understand things as well. So I think, this is my stream is like I'm pressing the button to start a discussion on the internet, and then I just happen to be leading the discussion at the time. That's kind of how I see it. But thank you. It's genuinely, all the nice comments have been really helping me stay motivated and keep coming back to the streams, and like no pressure or anything, but it is really nice to hear. So I'm glad that that's coming across. Thank you. Okay, gonna get started. Let me know if the audio is okay. I think it is, but let me know if you need any adjustments, and we'll see what Matthew has to say.
Downgrade from the first game. In Dark Souls 1, players find and rescue more and more NPCs which head back to the shrine for a rest. Those NPCs are often useful to the player in some way, but the genius of it is they also often disappear from the shrine at some point too. Each character in Dark Souls 1 feels like they have some kind of goal in the world, and the fact that they move from the shrine brings them to life.
Yeah, so I think that this is something that's very powerful about Dark Souls 1 to kind of mimic what he was saying. Audio is good? Okay, awesome, thank you. Um, and I like the fact, like he does, that in Dark Souls 1, you feel like you're a part of a world that is a living, breathing space, that the NPCs that you encounter aren't just accessories to you, but they actually have their own things that they want to do that are important to them. That makes them feel more like characters and less like props in a video game. So yes, I do agree that that's great. And if we look at Dark Souls 1 and the sorts of characters that kind of come through the game and interact with us, it's interesting to kind of look at the roles of these different characters. Andre, for example, is like your main blacksmith. And he and all the other blacksmiths, I don't think they ever come back up to town. I guess Rickard does. Is that right? Is that Rickard? Oh, no, Rickard I think is down in the I can't remember if that's Rickard or Griggs, but anyway, let me just click on this and see. Oh yeah, so Rickard actually stays down in the cage. Griggs is the one who kind of comes up into the shrine. Yep. So, most of these characters only kind of overlap with you briefly, or they stay outside of the shrine. So like Quelana doesn't come in. Petrus comes in but then he leaves. Patches, the same thing. Oswald, who's this guy? I always forget. Oh yeah. So he stays outside. All these characters feel like they have something that they are doing that is important in the world, and they all have their own narrative arc. Like they have a start and a finish to their arc. Even if that start and finish is just to go like get depressed and go die down in the New Londo ruins, with a couple of exceptions. I don't think like Anastasia basically stays in place for the most part, but she still does have a bit of a quest that elapses. So all these characters feel like they have some motion, like something to do. I guess Snuggly kind of doesn't, but whatever. They're kind of like a bonus character, I guess you could say. Pretty much everybody else has something to do and has a conclusion to their arc as well. So going over some of the stuff in Dark Souls 2, I think there's a good amount of that actually. Not every character, but quite a few of the characters either exist and are doing something outside of town, or will have some kind of a narrative arc that's somewhat unique of their own. For example, Carillion kind of doesn't do a whole lot. You meet him at the pier. He's this guy. He's the mage trainer. And as far as I can recall, once you actually get him back to town, he doesn't really do much. And he just kind of sits there. He pontificates at you. Same thing with Rosabeth, right? So there's a few characters who don't really do that. But Strayed has his own unique thing, right? Strayd's the guy in the in that cell in the Bastille, and he has a little quest that you kind of like a little arc that he goes through with you, and then he has the unique ability to transform items that you've gotten from bosses into unique spells. Cloan doesn't really do a whole lot, but she does have a little narrative arc with her father, who's in town. Let's see, Strayed, yeah, we talked about her. Shalquar kind of just hangs out, but she's pretty intriguing. She does have quite a lot of useful information. So even though she doesn't roam the world, I guess that's the thing, right? Like his perspective seems to be that characters that move around and engage with the world and have an active story are better than ones that are props, and I would agree with that. But let's consider Sweet Shalquar as a potential alternative to that. Let's think about her role as a character, right? She in particular is a cat that seems to have actively decided to settle down in Majula, right? She wants to be there, and she seems to kind of be just kind of hanging out until the world ends and watching what happens and commenting on it. So it wouldn't really make sense for her to wander around the world and I don't know, discover things and go chasing mice or whatever in various places, although that would be really funny, because just like Alvina in Dark Souls 1, she has a place that she's become attached to and a reason for sticking to that place. So using Shalquar as an example, I don't think we should use this kind of character and the fact that they don't roam the world as a detractor against the game, or as a way of saying that this character is like worse than one who does. I think the way that we should test this, the way that we should evaluate it, is saying what is their function, and is their function compelling, regardless of if that function is just like a wanderer or a homebody. is it compelling for them to do that thing, right? I think that maybe sometimes some of the critiques like Matthew's tend to focus on a like spot the differences sort of approach, not to be too glib about it, but they'll say in Dark Souls 1 characters roamed around, in Dark Souls 2 they didn't. I like the fact that they roamed around in 1, and I miss that now in 2, and so 2 is not as good as 1 because they didn't have that feature that I like. Instead of evaluating each character independently and seeing what they do and whether that's compelling. So kind of going through the list, we're not going to go through every single one here, but like Moglin the Armorer doesn't roam around, doesn't stay in town, doesn't leave town or get assassinated or have his soul pilfered by Lautrec or anything like that. But he does have an arc, right? And the function and the innovation that he brings to the game is in the format of, you know, having his personality shift as a result of how you interact with him as a merchant. He also has his inventory expand as a result of you interacting with him. And then he also will sell you things that are like special sets of armor, which is really cool, and some unique and kind of weird and quirky sets of armor. That's pretty cool as well. So yes, they did make him less interesting by not having him have I suppose, like a roaming narrative arc. But given that his character like actively sought out Majula as a place to have a shop, he has a narrative justification for being there, and he does change and grow and evolve and like give you something unique while he is there in Majula. So I personally, when I was playing through, never thought that a character like Moglin or Malin, I never thought, oh wow, since he isn't an actively moving agent within the world, that he is less compelling or less of a valid character or anything like that. That's just my take. And I think, you know, again, we don't have to go through the whole list, but if you just go through here on your own time and run through it in your head and be like, what the head of Vengarl, Lonesome Gavlon, Bastral Ray, or some of these are summons, but like, you know, going through some of these characters over here, do they not do things? Do they not have interesting quest arcs and stuff like that? Does, what's her name? Lucatiel not have something interesting that she kind of goes through? Does she not have a quest? Does she not have something that she gets up to? Same thing with, where are the NPCs that you can fight? I can't remember his name. Oh yeah, Crichton. You know, he's obviously doing something. And he has his own thing that's going on, etc., etc. Right? Like, I think there's a lot more here than just they either roam or they don't. I'm obviously oversimplifying. I'm not trying to straw man Matthewmatosis's perspective here. Also, I know I spelled this wrong. But yeah, that's kind of my initial reaction to that.
It feels like their usefulness as a vendor to the player is secondary to their own goals. You're not the center of the universe in Dark Souls 1 at all.
I do feel like Shalquar, yeah, so I don't feel like the center of the universe to anyone except Shanalot in Dark Souls 2, and I don't really feel like the center of the universe to anyone except for Frampt in Dark Souls 1, maybe Gwendolyn to a certain extent as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that Dark Souls 2 feels like its own lived-in space. I don't think the fact that people come to Majula really makes me feel like the center of the universe. I mean, like, Melentia shows up there directly to sell things to us, but she seems completely, you know, like sort of ambivalent as to our presence. She's not exactly... she warms up to us eventually, but still, you know, it's like she came to Majula as a place of refuge, not to follow you around specifically. She says, like, it's high time I leave here and go to Majula. Maybe I'll meet up with you again, and then I'll have a special deal for you or something. But same thing, like Laddersmith Gillian, I think he tags along because he thinks it'll be safer. Like, people are trying to pursue him and kill him, so it makes sense for him to go to Majula. Lycia, the sort of priestess lady, she shows up there because she's trying to fool people and trick them and steal souls from them. She definitely doesn't, you know, she cons you out of 2,000 souls if you use her mechanism to get into the Huntsman's Copse. So, I mean, like, she's definitely not, you know, worshipping the ground under your feet or anything like that. I think Kale, the cartographer, the guy who looks at the map, he definitely seems grateful, and he's one of those characters who probably wouldn't have come back to Majula without you. But he still has his own thing, right? Like, his job is to look at the map. Like he's watching Dora the Explorer in Dark Souls 2. So, you know, he's got his own thing going. I guess the armorer, maybe like Salden and the armorer, and what is his name, Lenegrast, and Rosabeth do kind of like worship you, not worship you, but do kind of like feel entirely reactive to what you do in the world. But even then, it's like, Rosabeth is following Carillion around. Carillion is off like gazing into the sun, like staring at the sun, for 24 hours a day, which is just tells you a whole lot about him. Salden is moping, like he doesn't really care about you that much. I don't know. I never got the impression that just because people were gathering to Majula, that it was that detracted from their character at all. I also really genuinely liked it because the world of Dark Souls 2, especially on launch before like Dark Souls 3 and the subsequent games came out, it feels so lonely. It's not like empty of enemies or empty of like it's not barren, right? But it feels very lonely and very haunted and very distant in some ways. And so when you find that one person who still has like a shred of their sanity left and you manage to bring them back, or you don't even bring them back, you are not bringing them back, you are just you're just I'm hang on one second, you're just kind of overlapping with them, but then you see them again later and it's like, oh my god, they made it back, they're home. And now we have this like the only achievement I remember in the game is called Gathering of Exiles, and you get that when you get like eight NPCs or something back in Majula, and it's like, oh, okay, a few of us actually made it, a few of us survived. It's such an oddly comforting moment, and Majula itself is just so serene and beautiful, and it does start to feel like home, and it feels like you've picked up a few strays, right? Like there's something very, very cool about that. And it's all ephemeral. You know that you're going to have to say goodbye to them sooner or later. But for that brief moment, it's kind of beautiful. And it's a shame to me that he didn't have that experience, the same experience that I did with that. Saria says, my name is Luca. Oh, God, I'm going to tear up. I beg of you, remember my name, for I may not myself. This is all I have. Yes. I don't know how you could see a character like that and be like, this game doesn't have like, good characters in it. At least one. At least you have to acknowledge that, right? Like, I don't know. But let's continue. And the fact that you leapt to that quote right away, like it obviously had a strong impact on a lot of people.
Each character has their own little story they go through as the game progresses. This gives them all an air of believability and provides a satisfying sense of closure, even if that closure usually results in them going hollow.
I minor quibble with that. I don't think they necessarily have a satisfying sense of closure. I think like this character here going hollow, or like most of the characters do go hollow, like the pyromancy trainer, for example. I think it's kind of the opposite. I think their conclusions are unsatisfying. Maybe satisfying in the sense that they don't feel cut off abruptly, like they have a full conclusion that feels like deliberately crafted. But I think for a lot of them, they're also just like, they're not happy endings, right? And some people might find it unsatisfying that, you go to town, you have this character like Laurentius, who, I think that's his name, who sells you pyromancies, and I think he's the guy, every time you leave, he says, like, take care, friend, don't you dare go hollow, which is, like, one of the nicest and most, like, heartwarming things in the game. And then when you buy all his stuff and you fully upgrade your pyromancy gloves or whatever the requirements are, he just disappears. And there's no, like, quest updated, go find Laurentius or anything. You have no fucking idea where he is. And then if you just happen for some insane reason to go back down to Blighttown, you're wandering around in the swamp, then you can find him down there. And I think that's really cool. It's really compelling. It makes the character feel like he does have his own quest, and it kind of talks to you about your relationship to him in a very kind of intimate way. But also, like, a lot of players can miss that entirely and just see him disappear, and that might feel unsatisfying and unfinished. And then I think players going down to Blighttown and just finding him there, some players might not even recognize who he is because it's just like randomly some NPC down in the swamp. I think probably most people would figure that out, actually. But still, it's something that's entirely missable, and so for those who find it, I think it's great, but for those who don't, it can wind up feeling hollow, no pun intended, and unfinished. Sorry says, me headcanoning Lucatiel got a happy ending because I say so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, the I think that the bonfires respond to the power of the human will. So as far as I'm concerned, your character is the most powerful thing in the verse at any given time, like when you're playing the game. So yeah, you can will Lucatiel back into some sort of positive ending until Dark Souls 3 anyway, unfortunately.
In Dark Souls 2, once an NPC arrives at Majula, they remain in the exact same location for the entirety of the game, and nothing of note happens to any of them during the entire playthrough.
Um, I don't think that's entirely fair. Yes, they do remain in the same place, but I think that quite a bit of note happens to Moglin, as well as what's his face, Kale to a lesser extent, and Shalquar gets a lot of interesting dialogue. And what's his name? Laddersmith Gilligan also has like a little something. And then once you meet Navlan and he starts giving you quests to get people's items, especially if you decide to go the route of killing them, then things can get interesting as well. So, but I see what he's saying. There's a handful of NPCs that just kind of sit around, not doing anything, and like that's fine. You know, you don't have to find those compelling. I don't really have much to say about Cloan. I think that her overall design is really interesting, like her two simultaneous paradoxical haircuts and her bone toy, and like there's a lot of little interesting, very subtle details about her outfit that we talked about on stream before. But you know, if you don't like the fact that she just kind of sits there and doesn't engage with her father and just looks at bones all day, like okay, like I'm not gonna get mad at that, you know. Until Dark Souls 3 says, sorry, Zapona, does it bring you joy to hurt the souls? Only a little bit. Only because there's... no, it doesn't. I mean, again, here's the thing about Dark Souls 3. To give you like a little silver lining. I think I know what happened to Lucatiel, but when you meet Horus in Dark Souls 3, he's the guy who... Like, Horus the Hushed, the guy who doesn't talk, who's hanging out with that knight from Astora. Initially, when you pick up his armor, if you get through totally legitimate means, it will say something along the lines of like executioner's armor. So if you just look at that and don't look at the description, you might think that Horus is an executioner. But then the description actually says that he just found this armor somewhere and thought it looked cool and put it on, and then he was like, yeah, this works. So we have no idea if Horus was ever an executioner. Maybe that description is saying that he was previously an executioner, which is why finding this garb felt comfortable. He's like, yeah, this is natural, this is what I would normally wear. Or maybe he just liked it for other reasons about his character, right? So it's entirely possible that the opposite happened with Lucatiel and the Curse-Rotted Greatwood. Like, who knows what really happened to her? All we know is that the Curse-Rotted Greatwood has her clothing is nearby, and you can get the sword from transmuting the soul of the Curse-Rotted Greatwood. But who knows what that means exactly, right? It could also be Azlatiel, her brother, that made his way into the tree, and she's still wandering around out there somewhere, right? So it's totally open for interpretation.
The worst example is the blacksmith's daughter, who sits on a rock just yards from her father and mentions he looks a little like her dad. Talking to the blacksmith reveals he's happy she's come home, and yet, no matter how much time elapses or how much you talk to either of them, nothing ever gives you the impression that the daughter has ever bothered to say one word to the blacksmith working just a little to her right, and vice versa. The most original thing the game...
Yeah, so I understand that a lot of people don't like that quest and or those characters and how they interact, and I kind of sympathize. It feels, especially from a Western perspective, it doesn't feel like finished. You know, it feels broken or buggy or something. Like if you were to play a game like Baldur's Gate, that would never happen, right? Those characters would have some kind of interaction, or you would have some kind of a dialogue option to talk to them, or like some way of interacting with them. And like Gwyn forbid, if you decided to attack one of them, the other would react to it and wouldn't just sit there looking off into the ether. And that's not something that Dark Souls 2 decided to do. I want to kind of offer a devil's advocate position, or perspective rather, and just say that I think if you look for how it ties into the themes of the game overall, it's quote unquote forgivable, or at least maybe like a better way to put it would be it makes sense. because you have characters who not only have lost their personality and their identity and their mind, but also have lost parts of their bodily identity. Like, they look different. I don't think Lenegrast in his life was weird and green and like bulbous and a corpse, right? Like, maybe he was some of those things. But I think what's happening is that Chloan lost her mind, and Lenegrast lost his body to a certain extent. Like, both experienced severe changes in those regards. And so they kind of can't recognize each other anymore because they're not the people that they used to be. The curse has taken something away from them. So Chloan doesn't recognize him. He recognizes her, but doesn't, like, I don't know. I'm sorry if this is a sore point for anybody, but if you have a family member who has suffered memory loss, sometimes it's really hard to know how to interact with them and how to, like, approach them if they just don't recognize you. So the distance between them, I think, is meant to be tragic and poignant, and it's meant to kind of underscore the fact that, like, there aren't really any happy endings here, right? Here is a father and his estranged daughter. They were both, the daughter was, like, out in the wilderness on her own, and facing dangers and stuff, and somehow survived and made it home safe. But it's not a happy ending, right? There's not going to be the reunion where the father and daughter reunite, because the curse took that away from them. The curse eats and erodes away at everything, and the best you can do is be comfortable before the sunset. Now, that's my interpretation, and I think that I wouldn't say that you're crazy or stupid if you're like, this is just broken, it was badly written or whatever. I think that's also a fair interpretation. I just feel like it takes something away from the game, from your experience of the game, because there's another interpretation that ties it more closely into the themes of the game. And if you look at it from that light, I think it can enhance your enjoyment of it overall.
Does with any of its NPCs is turn the story of Patches and Lautrec on its head by making it more ambiguous and pitting them against one another instead of the player. This had me intrigued to begin with, but ultimately ends up disappointing too. Since they're busy with each other, it's hard to feel involved.
So that's an interesting, like, gentle contradiction. He seems to find it compelling that NPCs have their own quests and do things that don't revolve around the player. But then I think he is responding to these two characters having their own conflict as being a bit, like, overcorrected in the opposite direction, right? Because now all they care about is themselves or each other, and they're not as invested in you as a character. So it's interesting. On the one hand, there are certain things that he feels are enhanced by some distance from the player, and others where I think it feels too far removed. Personally, I do think they did a really interesting job of taking the archetypes of characters from Dark Souls 1 and iterating on them in interesting ways. I also find it a little difficult to get invested in Creighton and Pate. I always just side with Pate because that's who I come across. Creighton doesn't really appeal to me at all. So it's like, whatever. But yeah.
Neither of them does anything interesting with you until the end of their story.
I don't know about that. I think like, I don't really focus on Creighton all that much, or Creighton. But Pate does some interesting things, right? Like, he opens that gate for you, and you go through and he kind of pseudo traps you in there. He gives you the white sign soapstone, which is also a really important item. He kind of points you in the direction of treasure in the Earthen Peak. So I don't think that's fair either.
I feel like this could have been great if the other NPCs had been able to compensate for this lack of interaction which was present in the previous games. In fact, I'm happy they didn't retread those Patches and Lautrec stories for the third time, but the replacement story isn't quite up to the task. At least this was quite original though, which is more than I can say for most of the other NPCs, especially Crestfallen Warrior III.
Yeah, I can understand the concern about, like, Crestfallen Warrior. That's fine. I will say, I lost my train of thought. 1 second.
More than I can say for most of the other NPCs.
Oh, I think if you go through the NPCs and you actually look at the list over here, there's quite a lot of interesting stuff going on. You know, Chancellor Welliger is a ghost, and he's, like, kind of pontificating about the past. Ornifex, like, what do I have to say about Ornifex? Like, she's a bird demon who converts souls into special items, and she's in that creepy room with all those weird statues and stuff. If you just go through the list here, like Gavlan is interesting and memorable and kind of cute in his own way, and he sells you like poison items uniquely, which is kind of cool, and he roams around the world, and you'll find him in different places. Navlan and your interactions with him, the options for quests that he gives you, and like rewards and penalties for that are really interesting. Strayed as well is pretty interesting, like an NPC that you free from stone and then is like simultaneously a teacher and a boss soul converter and a lore dump. Shalquar, right? Just go through this list and really think about all the different things. Like a character who builds ladders for you, like what the fuck is that? It's almost goofy. It's so unique, right? But thinking about that in terms of the actual like practical reality of the game or whatever, you have a character who is able to construct new pathways for you into new areas. That's pretty cool. That's interesting. Lycia does a similar thing where she can help you switch between different areas, but she also shows up and can invade you, can serve as a major impediment to a very difficult NPC invasion. But also, if you specifically invest heavily in miracles and in faith, she can reveal some kind of interesting facts about the world as well that she won't tell anybody else. So I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, I think. Not to mention the Covenant leaders and everything that happens with them, especially the like Dark Diver Grandal. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, and I don't think it's fair to just say that because there are some NPCs in town that don't do anything, that there's no like innovation or whatever in the game overall in regards to its characters. Head of Vengar's another one.
Warrior the Third. I think Fromsoft earned themselves some leeway since they were forced to switch from the world of Demon Souls to Dark Souls. It seemed natural they might want to carry a few things over. That's why I'm willing to overlook the appearance of Patches and the Crestfallen Warrior in Dark Souls 1, as well as the Maiden in Green in Dark Souls 2. The Crestfallen Warrior has already existed in this universe though, so seeing another character fulfill the same role with the same voice actor is really jarring. It really hurt my suspension of disbelief when all I could think about while talking to him was how coincidental it was to have the exact same character appearing again thousands of years later for no reason.
Okay, so here's the thing. I was with him, fully in agreement, or mostly, up until he said for no reason, and that's where he lost me. And now I want to kind of elaborate on that. And I think if I had to pick one thing that I most thoroughly disagree with in regards to both this critique and Dark Souls 2 critiques in general, it's the for no reason thing. It's saying, I can't think of a good reason for this, therefore there is none. And hey, maybe in some cases there is genuinely not a good reason to do this. Maybe sometimes it's objectively bad, if we can say that. But in this particular instance, I want to mention something that I mentioned before, which is when Sekiro came out and I swung the sword for the first time, I kind of groaned because it was making the same exact sound as the katana in Dark Souls 1, which I think was just a reuse of the sound from the katana in Demon Souls. And in my head, I was like, okay, I understand that sometimes you need to like reuse library sound effects, like a royalty-free sound effects. But this is a brand new game, and you have like a budget. Like this is the only sword that you get in the whole game for the most part. So why wouldn't you design a brand new, cool, unique form of audio for it? Make something that's truly special, truly unique. And my friend, who's a sound designer, who I think understands like Eastern design perspectives better than I do, said because in the West it's about innovation, but in the East it's more about legacy. Now, just to be clear, I don't think the traditional concepts of West and East, like that divide, is sort of artificial, right? Just want to acknowledge that. But for a Japanese developer, for a Western developer, totally redoing the sound design and the aesthetic design and everything and building it from scratch every single time might be considered very impressive, because we are basically innovating and continuing to iterate and make new things. New and exciting is the way to go. Whereas something that is reused over and over and over again from an Eastern perspective might get cooler and cooler and cooler the more times it's reused, because now it has more legacy behind it. Now, this isn't just like the new hotness that we designed for this game. This is the legendary katana sound that we've been using for 20 years, and this katana sound carries with it the legacy of Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and 2 and 3, and now it's made its way all the way into Sekiro yet again, right? The familiar and the thing that having a legacy is more important than being innovative from a certain perspective. Now, of course, not everybody in the East or the Orient thinks the same, right? Like, I'm trying to be like overgeneralizing, but that's just one way to look at it. So, I think to us, myself included, seeing quote unquote the same character in a game feels like it's reuse of assets. And to answer your question, sorry I asked why can't the character just return? It feels to us like we're getting cheated. We spend money. And when we spend money and buy a game, and then spend more money and buy a second game, we expect, like right or wrong, we expect that the second thing that we get is going to be giving us a different and unique experience or value, or however you want to phrase it, compared to the first one. So if I spend $60 on 3 games, or I guess $80 now, on 3 separate games, and they have the same exact character doing the same exact thing, I feel like I've been cheated a little bit. Even if I only got cheated out of 50 cents or $1, however the proportion of that character is worth in the game, I feel like I didn't get my money's worth because A, it's the same shit, and B, it's breaking my immersion because it feels like a fourth wall break. So I think I understand where Matthew is coming from and where people are coming from when they say that they dislike this character. That being said, or not the character, the reuse of the character. That being said, this isn't the same character. Patches is the same character in Dark Souls 3 as he is in Dark Souls 1. But this character is not the same character. He has a different role in the story. He says different things. He reacts to things differently. He has a different narrative arc. He is similar, but he's not the same. In the same way that like Zigmire and Zigward are similar characters between Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, but they're not the same. And there is a theme that is going on in this trilogy of archetypes getting brought back, reused, recycled, and permutating. So what this character is, as far as I understand it, is the archetype of the kind of sad, miserable, dejected warrior that has been brought back to explore further, to spend more time with, because they found it. It's not because they were lazy and they didn't care and they wanted to recycle something for no reason. It's because they like the character, right? They enjoy this kind of character. They enjoy this archetype. They find this kind of interaction with the player compelling, and they want to keep exploring it. And this particular version of the character is less like maniacal and less totally dejected and less like on the brink than the one in Dark Souls 1. The one in Dark Souls 1 seems like he's totally fed up and thinks that everything is kind of an awful, cruel joke. Whereas this one is more kind of sorrowful and remorseful, but there's a little bit more hope in him because he's still giving you the Covenant ring. He's still saying that there might be a chance for you, even if everything seems totally bleak, right? So here's someone who has tucked himself away in a corner of the world to watch everything fade away, but will still maintain a connection with somebody else and like help them out a little bit. Whereas the Crestfallen Warrior in Dark Souls 1 is just like this embittered jerk who will nudge you in the right direction, but it's more like he's playing a prank on you. He's like, "Oh, you, oh yes, the the chosen one, right this way, sir. Yeah, you see that big bell up there, on the other end of like that giant fucking demon and all those corpses and the fire and everything else. Go ring it, and then when you're done with that, go deep underground, no deeper than that, deep underground, and then you'll go through like a whole bunch of liquid shit, and then you'll get stung by a bunch of bugs, and then you'll meet a demon lady. Ask her about the next bell. She'll help you out," right? Like, he basically seems to be keeping himself alive just to fuck with you and kind of make fun of your quest. And then I forget exactly when this happens, but just play along. Like when Framp shows up and then he's actually validating your quest, he's actually like saying, "Oh yeah, you are a prophesied person. You are the chosen one." Then he's like, "Shit, my prank is over." And then he just goes and dies or goes hollow because the purpose that he had was to fuck with you, and now you seem to actually be on a validated path, and so he can't do that anymore, right? Very different characters. Yes, they like the voice actor and they brought the voice actor back. Yes, they're sitting around moping and they kind of exposit and then they nudge you on your quest. but they're not the same character. They're not at all. And I think that this is a very kind of cursory, superficial reading that doesn't really try to understand the potential alternate interpretation. To answer your question, Saria, I think the character can and then sometimes should return. I think there's some limits, though. I was really pissed off with Patches in Elden Ring. He had no fucking business being in that game. I was not happy at all. I think I like turned off the game and like took a break for the rest of the day when I got to him. Fucking annoying that he was in that game. But that's more because he had an arc that was completed in Dark Souls 3 and had a really nice and really important and well done conclusion, and then they just brought him back for some fucking reason and didn't really do anything with him. He was connected to Tanith, I guess. He wanted to do the love to her, I guess, or something. He was a bandit. He worked with some bandits. Was a bandit. Who fucking knows? Like, I'm sure there's more to it than that. The whole him showing up and then like just unsummoning himself during the Radon fight was cute, but then nothing else really happens. He just kind of shows up and gives you some quests and then leaves. I was not amused by that in particular. But anyway.
The worlds of Demon Souls and Dark Souls were brilliantly realised because they felt internally consistent. You have to suspend your disbelief about magic and all that, but once you do, the world behaves in sensical ways. I'd credit this as part of the reason why Demon Souls became a cult hit in the first place. It does an amazing job of pulling you into its world. When I played the Souls games, I walked around cautiously, taking in my surroundings, and when presented with a situation where I had to make a choice, I would usually try to make the one that would realistically pay off.
So let me just say I agree with pretty much everything he's saying here. The Souls games have a knack for really pulling you in and drawing you into this immersive world that feels very real and tangible and consequential. I remember the first thing that I think I played Demon Souls first. I can't remember if it was Demons or Dark. But the first time I played Demon Souls, I saw Atlas on the box, ATLUS, the publisher, and I'd heard that Atlas just makes like really grindy games that require a lot of repetition. So I was very skeptical, and I went in and I played pretty carefully. Kind of treated it like an action game. I wasn't really paying much attention. And then I was so used to games putting in like invisible walls. Let me actually just see if I can find some footage. Oh, this looks interesting. Where did Chakra come from? Abstract section. I gotta check that out later. Demons, Souls, no commentary. What's called Bolatar. Hey Kavak, how's it going? Good to see ya. Just trying to look up something from Demon Souls. Sorry, this is really loud. I don't know how loud this is. Saria says, I was thinking of like Romani and Cremia versus Malin. I honestly didn't even realize it was supposed to actually be the same character. Oh yeah. I actually be curious to hear your take on that. Is it ever made explicit that the characters in Majora's Mask are literally the same? Because I always thought it was something like a dream world where the characters were like based on the same, like based on characters from from Ocarina of Time. But are they literally the same ones that like got pulled into an alternate world or something? But yeah, hi Kavak, it's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope your week is going okay. So the reason why I'm pulling up some Demon Souls footage here, forgive me for pulling up the remake, is that I wanted to kind of explain like my experience with the world building and all that. I've been so used to playing through these games, like playing through like modern games that had come out at the time of the original, and being handheld and basically having everything kind of made relatively safe, you know, and something that I realized, or that I kind of jump around a little bit here, that I was very surprised by was the use of, or lack thereof, of invisible walls. So I played through the first area, and I was pretty, you know, pretty cautious, but also a little bit treating it like an action game. I think I just played Bayonetta or something like that recently, and so I wasn't like fully shielded up and fully like immersed and everything like that. Fun with the physics there. And so I got through the first area, the first castle, and this took me probably like a half an hour because I died a couple of times. I thought I was making some progress. And then just kind of jumping up around here, and you come up here, you fight these guys. Sorry for jumping around, almost done. And then once you come up here, there should be like a little ledge that, yeah, this ledge over here. So this is the most memorable ledge for me in my whole gaming career, because I walked out here after like a half an hour of finally making it up this far and playing very carefully and cautiously and all that. And then I like fought that enemy and I killed him. And then I was like so used to there being invisible walls that I just automatically walked over here to the edge. And I was just like, okay, my character is going to bump against the wall. I'm going to be safe. And then I'll just like skirt along the wall up to the next area. And I immediately fell off and died. And I was like, oh, that's what you want to do? You want to play it that way, you fucking game? And I turned it off and didn't play it. And if it hadn't have been for me like watching a friend or a streamer or something play Dark Souls, I never would have come back to it. Because at this point, I thought what the game was doing was fucking with me. Because I'd been so conditioned to think of every like potential ledge and whatever as like completely made safe, but they were being made safe by all of these like invisible walls. And we as designers, like we call them blocking volumes usually. So we all know as game designers, we got to put blocking volumes everywhere to make sure that the players don't get into trouble, that they don't have a bad time, that they don't wander off course. And Miyazaki and co were like, no, man, if you walk off of a fucking cliff, you die. If you walk off a ledge, you fucking die. What do you mean? Take the blocking volumes out, right? And so I initially perceived this as being a detractor from the game and like a funny little prank that Miyazaki was playing on me. Little did I know, I hadn't discovered the broken pendant yet. But this was actually a brilliant piece of game design, and it seems totally normal to us now, but it was actually like borderline revolutionary at the time, because at least Western game design was going in the completely opposite fucking direction from this. So I say all of that just because I want to validate his perspective and say that I 100% agree with the overall design philosophy and the way that these games pull you into the world. And because I'm about to disagree with everything else he says. So I just wanted to make that clear. It looks like he's actually... Is he going to do it? Is he going to make the same mistake? No, okay, he's smart. See, he's respecting the environment. He's respecting the world. Kavak says, how's it going? I'm doing okay, thanks. This week has been pretty challenging. Haven't been getting much sleep, just had a lot going on at work, but it's almost the weekend, so again, look forward to catching up on some sleep this weekend. Saria says, oh no, the characters in Majora's Mask are in a separate universe. Okay, it's like a pocket universe, similar but different from Hyrule. It's why there's no Link. Link in that world is the deity mask. Oh, interesting. Okay, man, I gotta go back and play that game. I gotta get over the soundtrack and just get into it. Wait, so what you're saying is that is that the Skull Kid has universal AP, and that he basically created like a trillion micro universes and all of the like fish and stuff? Every single fairy has a universe in their brain. Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry. But yeah, that's cool. I still don't know the full lore of like the deity mask and stuff like that. I really need to go back and finish that. But I think I want to start playing Clair Obscure on stream pretty soon. So maybe I'll save the Majora's Mask. Are you familiar with Ship of Harkinian? Because I saw somebody playing Ocarina with Ship of Harkinian, and it looked really cool. I thought I might give that a try. If it works with Majora, then maybe I can check that out. A friend of mine is actually playing through it as well, and I think he's having a good time, so I gotta get in on that. Saria then says, oh, I'm sorry, I missed that from Kavak before. I've been editing footage from my recent Dark Souls 2 no equipment fists only stream. Damn, okay, that's pretty intense. Congratulations. How's it going? Are you actually finding it? Are you able to make any decent progress? Are you using the Covenant of Champions? I hear you get like bonus fist damage, like fist attack damage, right? If you're in the Covenant Champions, or you get like a ring or something that helps with that. But man, that's bold. I couldn't. I don't think I could ever ever do that. So it's pretty intense. Yeah, let me know. I would love to see that whenever the footage is ready. I don't know if I have I'd be curious to know what your streaming schedule is. You know, I'd love to stop by and check out this stream if you're still actively streaming. I'd love to see that in live. But then even if that doesn't work out, you know, I'd definitely be excited to see the results of your hard work there. So yeah, let me know when it goes up. Do you have a YouTube channel? Is it this the same name, totally not Kavak? Because I'd happily subscribe. I should have done that already. Sorry says, oh no, the characters image. Oh yeah, we already went over that. Okay. So yeah, all this just to say, I think I kind of explained that well. Kavak says rings or equipment. No. Oh, okay. No weapons, shields, armor rings, or offensive consumables. Damn. Okay. So like a full-on primal like caveman versus the world build. I like it.
This wasn't solely because of the punishing difficulty of those games. It was because the world made sense.
It's Kavak Luna. Okay, let me see. Make sure to do this before I forget. Kavak Luna. Oh yeah, there's your icon over here. Oh wow. I like your character. This is the one you're talking about? Yeah, it must be no equipment, fist only. Yeah, I'll check this out, man. Cool. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. I'm sorry if you mentioned that before and I just totally spaced on that, but this is great. I like Dark Souls 2. That's just about all you need to know. Indeed. It tells you a lot about somebody. A lot of good things, I think. But cool.
Felt fair and was totally engrossing. Dark Souls 2 simply doesn't have the same attention to detail as the previous games in this regard. The world doesn't fit together either logically or thematically.
Okay, so again, before I'm going to listen to what he says. I don't want to cut him off, but I do want to say that this does already feel like a bit of spot the difference. Dark Souls 2, or I guess I just sort of object to how this is being set up. Like Dark Souls 1 has a continuous world that is kind of like a Metroidvania. There are different areas that are separated from one another, but at the same time, they are also continuous and they overlap. And I think it's fair to say, at least in terms of the overall game design, it is a Metroidvania designed sort of game, right? In terms of like the world. But that being said, and also the world is designed with its creatures, its enemies, its items, and its themes to kind of keep you on edge and keep you immersed and keep you engrossed. And then those two things kind of become fused in your head, right? Like both the interconnected world design and the logical world design, and then all of the emotions that you experience going through that world are fused together. And then we get to Dark Souls 2, and now Dark Souls 2 doesn't have an interconnected world design, and so it kind of seems like, well, if it doesn't have that, and that is directly connected to the way that I felt about Dark Souls 1, then I can't feel the same way about Dark Souls 2. And maybe that's the case. Maybe you need one to have the other, but then his argument kind of becomes, since Dark Souls 2 doesn't have the same level of interconnectivity in its world design as Dark Souls 1, then it can't also have those other things like the immersion and like the sense of like purpose. And I think there's a false attribution of the fact that these, like, there's a lack of logic to the world, that means that it then detracts from those other parts of it, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of like a jumbled up thing. But in other words, Dark Souls 2, like Bloodborne, there are parts of the world in Bloodborne that really don't quite make sense in terms of how they're laid out and how they transition between one another. Of course, we have the Lovecraftian dreamscape conceit that's applied to Bloodborne, but not every transition between a space to another space, or every bit of geography or topography, really is logical and consistent in the way that Dark Souls 1 is, but the game overall still has that soulsy feeling. And I think Dark Souls 2 does as well. I understand why the transitions between Earthen Peak and the Iron Keep, and between Aldia and the Archdragon, what's it called, Dragon Eerie, may be immersion breaking and might not be satisfying, but I don't think the fact that the world is not interconnected as seamlessly as Dark Souls 1 should say necessarily that the game then like cannot be immersive, basically. Now maybe I'm strawmanning him, maybe I misunderstood. I want to hear him out. I just want to kind of set up that template going in. Kavak says, I thought that thumbnail would be fun and goofy. Oh yeah, it's great. Nothing equipped only with his with this mustache, the brave warrior takes on the world. I love it. Sorry, his opponent says, I just want to say I'm lying in the hospital bed and have my ear parts charging so my mom can hear you. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry, mom, I'm going to try and get this right. Vous avez des amis très respectueux, ma chère. Il a l'air charmant. Is that that about right? I'm really glad to hear that. Um, I apologize, Saria's mom, for my uh, my pronunciation. My grandmother had me study like Quebecois French when I was younger, but unfortunately, uh, I mean, I can ask for a coup de castor when I go, but pretty much everything else fell away. Um, but yeah, thank you very much. It's a very sweet and lovely compliment. Um, I'm glad that Saria is doing well after the surgery, and I hope I can provide some some entertainment amidst all of that chaos that comes with that. So. Saria says, translation, you have very respectful friends, dear. He sounds lovely. Thank you very much again. I think I understood about half of that, so I'll give myself half credit. Let's see. I've defeated 13 to 14 bosses, says Kavak, so far, and I've only died once. Oh, wow, damn. Said death was from the game ruining a job. I will say, I will defend a lot about this game. How do you say? I will not defend the jumping, the jumping mechanics ever. I don't know how to improve them per se, but I was not very like I always hate the platforming in these games.
In Harvest Valley, you can get a clear view of Earthen Peak and see the surrounding area. After beating the Earthen Peak boss, you then get in an elevator and go straight up about 15 more floors, arriving at Iron Keep. There's no hint of Iron Keep whatsoever from the outside of Earthen Peak. From Harvest Valley, the sky is overcast, but in Iron Keep it has a red glow and the surrounding area is suddenly an enormous wasteland of lava.
So I guess I'm not saying he's wrong about this. I'm not even yeah, I don't have any grounds to really contest his experience here. And as I'm looking at the footage that he's showing, I've kind of come to the same like how can I say? I definitely get where he's coming from, and I see the problem with the design of the level. The thing is, in my head, when I played the game, when I look at this, and I'm trying to imagine my progression through the level, I see my character, and my character goes deep into the level, and then gets goes into the mountain, and then gets on an elevator, and then goes up, and then is in like this caldera, if that's the term for it, basically like the big indentation in the mountain, and now you're sitting on top of Earthen Peak. I think that was the intention, and I think when I played through, my own suspension of disbelief kicked in, and I just didn't find it immersion breaking at all. I kind of summarized in my head what the game was trying to tell me. They're trying to say, you go into the mountain, you go up through the elevator in the mountain, and then you're at the top of the mountain in the volcano valley, right? So for him, the way that it was presented and implemented was just not compelling, and it broke his immersion. For me, I was able to just kind of overlook it, and I didn't even miss a beat. Didn't even occur to me that it was a problem. So it's interesting. Which one of us is right? Which one of us is wrong? I don't think there's a clear answer. I just think it's an interesting case study in like what people use, like where people's boundaries of suspension of disbelief lie. And my only complaint is that I wish when people talked about this game, they would look at it more that way. It's like, let's look at this as an opportunity to compare notes on our suspension of disbelief, as opposed to just being like, this is objectively wrong because it isn't presented in the way that I was expecting. You know what I mean? Let's see. Totally not Kavak. Most recently, I defeated Smelter Demon, which took around 9.5 minutes. Oh, wow. Only got hit 3 times because of the damage you take when you're near the boss. I ended up using all of my Estus. That makes sense. And some life gens on top of that. I had 11 plus 5 Estus, by the way. Oh, yeah, okay. That's, honestly, that's one of the ones that I would almost, if I were playing that playthrough, I would wait until very late in the game, because that boss is fairly terrifying, even with a lot of armor and fire resistance. You're not doing a, oh yeah, you said you died once, so you weren't doing like a no death run, which would be even more stressful. If that makes sense. I guess when you break it down, the Smelter Demon doesn't have a ton of attacks to memorize. So once you get the pattern down, it makes sense. But then it's like super tense, right? Because if you make one slip up, then if you get hit, then you have to take time to heal, and then that's more time where you're vulnerable and you can get thrown off your rhythm. So that's really cool though that you made it through that. Saria says, I'll never make a platformer, Miyazaki, before putting janky platforming in his Souls games. Yeah, and then I'll never make the same mistake again, Miyazaki, before putting that friggin' nightmare of the tombstone step down thing to the Frenzied Flame, which uh, I usually don't like using guides or walkthroughs for games. I will never play that section again, and if I do, I will never play it again without a guide, because like that, my first time down there was absolutely miserable. It was like this beautiful, haunting. I loved everything about the aesthetic and the music and the mystery of it all, and then those friggin' jumps just absolutely ruined my night. Like, I am never doing that puzzle unassisted ever again. I earned the right to say that I did it, and I was not pleased. And now I'm moving on to something else with my life. Just wait to see. It was the platforming in Night Rain was actually like sort of acceptable. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Dusk Bloods. But yeah, he doesn't need to to platforming, please. Totally Knuckleback says, you know words and stuff, so do you know what those oil things are called that are used to light up the Lost Sinners boss arena? I think they're called sconces, but that might just be what you put torches in. See. Oh, yeah. That's not exactly sconce medieval. Yeah, that's not exactly it. Yeah, there's those like channels that the oil is flowing in that you then light with a torch. I honestly don't know. I wish I did. I'm trying to rack my brain. The only thing I can think of, maybe it. One sec. Okay, so they kind of look like troughs for feeding animals with, but I think troughs are. Oh yeah, okay. So you could probably. I don't know if this was the intended term, but you could correctly use the term trough to describe it, because it is a channel. It conveys a liquid. It's got pitch in it. It looks like, which is the black tar stuff that you're igniting. So I think calling it a trough is probably fine. And I think in math too, like in audio, like a trough just means like the low points of a periodic wave. So yeah, makes sense. Hopefully that's a little bit helpful. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were looking for. Miyazaki will never let you know his next move, says Saria. Just when you think he's changed to do the same thing again. Oh my god, you're so right. You're so right. Although I was shocked that there was no patches in Armored Core 6, because, you know, Patch the Good Luck was the predecessor to Patches, and he first appeared in Miyazaki's, I think, first ever directed game, which is Armored Core 4 Answer, if I'm remembering that correctly, so kind of shocking that he wasn't in it. But, oh well, I guess maybe because that wasn't directed by Miyazaki, was it? That'd do it. That's probably why. If Patches shows up in fucking Dust Bloods, I'm gonna eat my Switch. That reminds me, I need to buy a Switch.
Similar transitions exist elsewhere. Going from the Tower of Flame down to No Man's Wharf makes no sense, as this places the wharf somewhere below sea level.
I mean, yeah, this one doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I think that's exactly the point. There's like a hidden path, and it's called Hidden Path to Hade if you go down here. And then it's like a cove that's kind of, it's a cave, right? It's a ocean cave. There's the ocean comes in and it's underground and it's off to the side and it's hidden, and then a ship comes out of it and it goes to Lost Bastille. This one I don't get. I think he's just saying because it's below sea level, like, okay, I understand, but again, this is one of those things in my mind where it just didn't bother my immersion at all. I just assumed that part of the geography. Oh, sorry about hitting the mic there. That part of the geography just overlapped nicely with the ships coming in, and I wasn't really worried about it. But okay, if this hurts your immersion, it's okay. An oil trough. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some special medieval name for it. Yeah, I'm sure there is, honestly. Maybe if you, not to be unhelpful, but if you were to search for that, like oil trough or medieval oil pit or something like that, and just kind of go from there, you might be able to find something. I'll give it some more thought. I have a friend who knows a little bit more about like arms, like medieval arms and armor and such, so they might be able to help me narrow it down. Somewhere around here I have a couple of books that I bought on like medieval arms and armor and siegecraft and stuff. back when I was researching for a Dark Souls 2 video like ages ago. I'll see if I can figure it out. I'm sorry I don't know it off the top of my head. Kavak says I got something to do. I'll be back after probably. Okay, yeah, no worries. Regardless, I always appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate the conversation. Good luck with your run, man. I'll be curious to see how you face all the challenges later in the game. So have fun. Have a good night.
Going to the boss in Aldia's Keep reveals the landscape to be far below, but in reality the player should be more or less at the same altitude as Majula here, since they've only walked up a few stairs. Even worse then, transitioning to the Dragon Area reveals an obviously impossible set of outcrops in the sky which weren't visible just moments before. There's a host of smaller issues as well, such as the Tower of Flame as seen from Majula, which is way out of position. As a result, the feel of Dark Souls 2 suffers heavily compared to the other games, which felt much more consistent in their geography.
So this is I think an interesting paradox to try to address as a game developer. You have made a game that is beloved and accepted and respected and creates a sense of immersion and consistency of experience because of its consistent, smooth, and interconnected world design. And now you want to make a game that is has like a dreamlike kind of non-logic to it that functions in ways that are not as smooth and logical, etc., etc. You want the world to just have weird places superimposed and sort of disconnected and overlapping and have it be kind of like dreamlike in a Lovecraftian dream sense. How do you do that when your legacy is built on, you're known for having the interconnectedness to it? And I think the easy solution for that is to just use portals. Because if you got to the end of Earthen Peak and then there was like a big fiery portal and you walked through the portal and all of a sudden you were in the Firelands, the what's it called, Iron Peak or Iron Keep, excuse me. I don't think anybody would be saying, aha, Earthen Peak doesn't connect naturally and this breaks my immersion because it makes no sense. It's illogical. Because there is a logical, well understood, well established conceit for how you're getting from point A to point B via the portal. Now consider that like a portal is basically the same thing as a loading screen. It's the same thing as going to one of the archstones in Demon Souls and just picking a level and warping there. But the difference is that it moves away from it being a menu that's part of the meta game and puts it diegetically as part of the game itself. And that is just one step away from not putting a portal there, but putting a natural seamless transition between the two areas in the world diegetically as well. So I think ideally we would create worlds as developers that feel logical and consistent. However, there is a limitation to doing things realistically. There is a limitation to doing things that follow like normal conventions. And sometimes if we want to just get crazy, we want to bend things around, we want things to surprise you, consider the fact that like if you put in that portal between those two areas, it might feel less broken, it might feel less immersion breaking, but then you lose the kind of sense of confusion and bewilderment. So here's the alternate perspective I want to offer. Get in that elevator and in your head, you're like, okay, well, I didn't see a big law. I didn't see any other areas around. I must be at the end of this area. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to see. I'm at the top of the tower. Where could this elevator possibly go? And then it goes up and up and up and up and up. And then all of a sudden you're in a completely different area with completely different topography. Yes, that's illogical, but isn't that also kind of fucking cool? Like, how did this work? How twisted and warped and crazy must the world be to allow for this kind of physics contradiction, so to speak, to happen? I think to some players that can be annoying because it's quote-unquote broken, whereas to other players it can be exciting because it's so weird and unexpected. And I'm kind of stuttering here because as a developer, I don't know, like I want to be able to pull out this magical formula where if we all just follow it, we'll be able to create a game that strikes that perfect balance. I want to be able to say, here's the way to solve this problem. You use portals in these situations, you use seamless transitions in these other situations, etc., etc. But really, there's no easy way to do it. There's no perfectly right solution. And the crazier you get with your world design, the harder it is to justify those weird warps and stuff. And then if, like, ideally you try and write it into your world, but the portal thing, if you use that, you miss out on the weirdness and the surprise of it, because everybody already knows what a portal does. Everybody knows what to expect, right? You don't know what you're going to expect when you come out the other side, but you expect the conceit of how it yanks you between the two places. So I don't know. I understand where he's coming from, but I don't think it detracts from the game. I think it doesn't detract from the game as long as you're willing to meet it halfway with the weird logic that it has, and willing to give it the benefit of the doubt that it's trying to do something dreamlike, trying to do something surreal. So, however, if you think that the game did actually intend to make things logical, that it was supposed to make things logical, and that it was supposed to be seamless, and the developers just didn't execute on that goal, and they wound up with a mess which was not part of their intention, then I think it's totally fair to say they failed in that. Subjectively, I think give them a little leeway, right? But if you think you have a case to say the game was always supposed to be the seamless, interconnected world, and they tried to make it and they just kind of screwed it up, and it shows, you don't buy the explanation that it's supposed to be dreamlike and surreal, then okay, that's a valid interpretation as well. I don't agree with that personally, but I think there's a world in which that is a fair assessment. So I'm doing really well of like a ratio of 1 minute of video to 15 minutes of me rambling about about shit. So this is great. Saria says, I always take things like this kind of in stride because I'm like, these guys can do all kinds of magical nonsense, so sure, I'm sure someone could build this, or this world can form this way. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and I think I'm inclined to agree. I think it's also made pretty clear by, maybe more so in Dark Souls 3, where they're like, hey, countries and kingdoms and civilizations from different places, but also different time periods, are all just kind of showing up around us. And also people are walking out of the past and into the future, and nothing makes sense, and up is down and left is right, and just have fun, just like go kill a few beasts for your own good. I think that the Dark Souls 2 team was already hinting at that sort of thing, at the logic of the world falling apart, because hey, the fundamental forces that hold the universe together, yeah, somebody done fucked those up, and now you're kind of picking up the pieces, but things are still falling apart. The logic of the world is not necessarily set in stone, so you shouldn't expect everything to basically be just like crash landing on a Metroid planet and everything flowing together, because it's just a planet that you showed up on, right? It's more nebulous than that.
Even worse than any of this is the Shrine of Winter, which makes sense physically, but not logically. The player is expected to kill the 4 old ones or amass 1 million souls before this will open, and all it does is circumvent a pile of rubble. A small pile of rubble blocks the way in the forest, so rather than climb over it, the character kills 4 of the most powerful beings in existence. I understand why they wanted Drangleic Castle gated off until later, but this ridiculously poor level design shattered my suspension of disbelief so hard it never recovered.
So this to me is really, really, really funny and interesting. I think that there is a tendency in video game design to games are really hard to make, and tools traditionally have been very limited, and resources and time have been very limited. So there are so many times in games where your characters just wind up doing things that are totally contrived and kind of basically the question of why can't you go through this area? Why can't you... One second. We're going to take a little detour here, because... What's the name of that game? Okay, no spoilers. Plague Tale is one of my favorite games. I'm not going to spoil it. The first minute of this video is going to be discussing The Witcher 3. So there is a tiny bit of spoiler for an area early on in The Witcher 3. If you're concerned about Witcher 3 spoilers, please come back in about 5 minutes.
At the beginning of The Witcher, there is an area in the introductory keep that you can't get to. There's a locked door that you cannot get through until you progress the tutorial to a certain point and then are given a key. Somehow enemies have gotten in
I lied. It's a spoiler for Witcher 1.
inside in another way, but that doesn't matter. What does matter is this cooking station elsewhere in the room. Geralt, like any person, is capable of getting into this room through this opening. There is enough space that he could squeeze around the cooking frame, or he could duck under it, or he could pick it up and move it. But the game won't let you do these things. Instead, you have to wait until you are given the key because this is the only scripted way to enter this room. In the recent Resident Evil 2 remake, there are sections of the Raccoon City police station that use invisible walls.
As a fellow Canuck, I love how he says raccoon instead of raccoon, but that's okay. Oh, sorry, it says, yes, exactly, like Phantom Hourglass, Link and Tetra sail into an alternate universe because of the Bellum. Like, there was no portal or anything that accidentally sailed into it. Yeah, that's really cool. Man, you're making me want to go replay Wind Waker. There's something just so uniquely kind of compelling and beautiful, but also haunting about exploring the open seas and coming across, like, the quirky little islands. I can just imagine Link and Tetra going a little bit too far off the map. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't even remember what happened, but I haven't played it since I was younger, but I remember immediately, like, wanting to sail off the map, and I think, if I remember correctly, if you try to sail off the map, there's just, like, more and more intense storms, but there's also, like, a ghost ship at one point, and so I felt like I was just trying to push against the limits of the game. But then as soon as I realized I could do that, like, that's all I wanted to know. I didn't want to know about the main plot or Ganon. I wanted to know what was beyond the veil. You know, I wanted to know what was beyond the storms, and that's where I needed to go. And the idea of Link and Tetra just kind of stumbling into something like that's something that's not supposed to be there. Sounds really, really cool. I don't know if that's what the game is about at all, but it just kind of reminded me of those experiences exploring the map in Wind Waker.
For the zombies, no matter how much Leon or Claire may be injured or bleeding or limping and close to becoming a meal for the hungry undead, these zombies will not follow you over these invisible boundaries between some areas. These aren't reinforced doors, and no matter how close the zombies are to grabbing you, the instant that you step over these lines, they drop down to a passive state and begin wandering away like you became invisible. So what do these two things have to do with a Plague Tale innocence? Well, I'm using them as a way...
Okay, I'll stop there. It's actually kind of unfortunate. I really like Joseph's content. I have for years. And based on his initial assessment here of Plague Tale, I got to, like, 5 minutes in, and then I was like, oh, I'm never playing Plague Tale because I hate this kind of stuff. This really bothers me. Like, I think it's bad game design that Geralt, like, just can't get around. I think it's bad game design that the enemies are walking back. And he basically says, like, there's a lot of this in Plague Tale. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm never going to play it because I hate that shit. And I don't even know why. It was, like, totally a whim. I think it was on sale. I can't remember. But I just bought Plague Tale. And I booted it up, and I was like, I'm just going to shit on this game. I hate this game. You know, look at how smart I am. Look at how cool I am for, for making fun of it. And then half an hour in, I was like, whoa, this is good. Right? Like, and then I played through it, and yes, it has those problems. It has a lot of those problems, especially in the first game, not so much the second one. But I was just completely immersed in the story and the characters. And this is the French game I was talking to you about, Saria. You probably remember, right, that, like, the first game, the characters have French accents, and I think it's set in France, and then it changes. They unfortunately switched to English accents later on, but, like, just look at some of the foliage and the lighting and stuff. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but this game is absolutely beautiful. Really amazing story, really nice characters, and I would have missed out on all of that because of this objectively broken game design. And now I'm kind of going back to this video, and when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, you know what, this is just a game design mistake. This really sucks. I can't forgive this. I'm gonna take 2 points off of Dark Souls 2. I'm sorry, but you're losing 2 points for that. And now I look back at it and I'm like, it does kind of suck, I guess, but whatever, man. like I don't know, like, this broke my immersion so hard that I could never recover for the rest of the game. Like, sometimes there are mistakes that get made. If you had that or limitations or whatever. Sometimes there is quirky game design. You might even call it bad game design, level design rather. And hey, if that ruined the game for you, I'm really sorry. And you can't, I think it'd be rude for me to go up to somebody and say, hey, no, you didn't have this emotional experience, or your emotional experience is illegitimate. You're not allowed to feel that way. That'd be shitty of me to say, right? So I'm not going to say that. I don't believe that. But I do believe that if you stick to that, you are potentially missing out on, you're like kind of putting a negative veil on the rest of the stuff that comes forward in the game. And if you can try to see around it, I think it could be beneficial in terms of your enjoyment of the rest of the stuff. Also, there's another interpretation that this was not a mistake. This was not some kind of a foible on behalf of the game developers, but that they actually wanted to do this for a specific reason, right? The idea here is that, sorry, it says, you're not allowed to have emotions when playing video games. I've studied under the tutelage of the great Mauler, and Mauler has instructed us that one must not experience fun or joy or any other sort of emotion which might be misconstrued as subjective while playing a video's games. It is simply not permissible for those of high intellect to experience joy when gaming. Like, I want people to have emotional experiences and with games, and to feel like they can express themselves through and along with the game. To me, that's where the joy of gaming comes from. Games aren't just like PowerPoint presentations from developers to show off how impressive their tech is or whatever. I mean, for some, I don't know, for some developers maybe they see it that way, but none that I've ever met. We want people to have fun and to have experiences, and we want people to like wake up the next day after playing a game and like run to tell their friends, what they experienced. Like I don't know, Pokemon, if you look back at Pokemon Red and Blue, those games are extremely primitive, right? They're extremely limited. They're super grindy. There's not a whole lot of meat on the bones on those games. But man, like, it was so cool to just, to find like a new weird Pokemon and then bring it in and show your friends in school and be like, oh my god, hey, look at this. It's like a bird, but it's on fire. Check this shit out, right? Like, all it was is like a little blurb of pixels on the screen. You could barely even make out what it was. But it was the most exciting thing in the world, because now you had this cool experience and you were attached to it emotionally, and now you get to share it with other people. Like that's what it was about. Like the experience of whatever that emotion is when you find a rare Pokemon and then you go and tell somebody about it. Like, I think one way or another, most of us as developers are trying to recreate that feeling for our players in whatever kind of game that we're making. So. But there's the other interpretation of this, which I actually really like, is the idea that this is supposed to be a cruel joke, that this was specifically designed and put here as a way of the game world itself kind of laughing at the player. Because you're on this quest and you're supposed to find the king, the one who peered into the very essence of the soul, the king who was the mighty conqueror who faced the giants and conquered the kingdom and built it on the ashes of other kingdoms and united other realms and blah, 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 blah. And you're supposed to find that king, and you're supposed to get a cure and whatever else comes with your role as the next monarch. And so you fight the four massive enemies, and you go through all of these horrible travails. You go down into the Black Gulch and up into the lands of fire and all that. And then you finally come to this shrine, and it's like an ancient shrine that's in the forest, and it looks all beautiful, and it's got these kind of grim carvings in it that also seem to be telling a story. It's very clearly part of the world, part of the legacy, and you feel like you've come across your the sort of gateway into the next phase of your journey. This is the last step. This is the last challenge before you're allowed to meet the king, or at least access his castle. And then it's like, oh yeah, whatever. You could go through. You could have gone through this whole time, idiot. Fuck you. Like, you just look and you're like, wait, what? And then there's this pile of rubble there. It's like, yeah, that's the ancient shrine that you got around. There's the warrior's quest, right? And then if you actually look closely, it looks like this archway, right, was supposed to just be a normal street that people could pass through. It just happened to be blocked over. So if this mesh here, if this rubble had just been deleted, if, I don't know, a couple of NPCs from Majula came by, just cleared the rubble out, then you could have just walked past the shrine and missed it entirely and just gone right to the castle, right? That's the whole point that Matthew's upset about. But that's kind of the point, right? The point is that the game is kind of saying, hey, no. None of that shit matters. The killing the big enemies, having the big quest, going on that epic journey or whatever, that doesn't matter. Like, this whole land is cursed. People already did that. That already happened. And you know what it resulted in? A big old pile of shit that's just right in the middle of the road that gets in other people's way and wastes their time. So now that you know that, what are you going to do about it? Are you still going to proceed anyway? And then when the DLC came along, the Shrine of Winter, it turns out, is a portal to the DLC area. So now they've taken this area that is basically this entirely perfunctory, crappy place that you probably have a nasty memory from, and now they've twisted it again and turned it into a portal that actually does lead to one of the best parts of the game. Now, Matthew couldn't know that at this time because the DLC hadn't even been announced when he made this video, as far as I know, so to be fair to him. But yeah, this all kind of comes down to how you approach the game. For me, I look at this, and this is like old Michael Zaki playing another one of his little tricks on us, except I guess it wasn't him, it was his prankster nephew Yui Tanamura, who was trying to play some tricks on us, and I think he got us, and I think he got us good, and I gotta give respect to the prankster. That's how I feel about it. But also, you know, if you get to this part in The Witcher and you're like, this sucks, I wouldn't necessarily blame you, because
of the
one second, the developers could have just made the wall a little bit tighter, right? Like they could have just put something here. They could have just blocked it off better. There is an argument that this is just badly designed. There is an argument that this needs to be better. That there needs to be a better explanation for why Geralt can't get past this. Especially later on when there's like a big critical battle and you have to go all the way around. There needs to be an explanation for why Geralt can't just jump through the fire and take some damage and move on. There actually is an argument that this is bad level design. And I think that's fine. I would hear that argument. If I made this game, I put this level out, and somebody as a player gave me that feedback, I would listen to it. I would think it would be valid. And also, there's another way of looking at this that I prefer, that I think just enhances the experience. Saria says, there's a moment like this in Tales of Graces. They won't pan the camera over, and it looks like a cliff, so you go through a whole maze, and then it turns out the camera was hiding the easy path. Oh my god, that's so good. See, I love that shit. I mean, I would be frustrated, but I would also be like, oh, that got me again, you know, like I would have to respect it. The path was literally off screen, and you come back around after the second to final boss fight, and it's like, what the fuck, why didn't you just let me walk down the path? Yes, oh my god, that's such brilliant game design, too, because it's like, it's also playing with your relationship as a player to your relationship, like your perspective as a player versus your perspective as a character. And normally as a player, you have a more omniscient perspective than the character. You know more about the game world than the character itself does. But in this case, you were both simultaneously tricked by the lack of perspective. And if the character in the world could have just looked around in a way that you couldn't, then they might have, like, assuming that you can kind of move the character independent of the camera, then there could be a situation, which is deeply ironic, where their character is looking at the solution to the puzzle or to the pathway, but you can't see it, even though they diegetically could. And that is so cool. That's such an interesting like clash. And for somebody to look at that and be like, oh, it's bad game design because we could have just circumvented it. Like, no. It's not. It's actually really, really smart. So I love that. I got to check that out. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not going to be specific. But if you like that sort of thing and you haven't played through Deltarune, all 4 chapters, there is stuff in Deltarune that kind of touches on that. That is all I can say. Without spoiling, I think you should play it. I think it's great. Yeah. Also, the soundtrack is awesome. I'm learning to play some of the songs on guitar.
Distance. I understand why they wanted Drangleic Castle gated off until later, but this ridiculously poor level design shattered my suspension of disbelief so hard it never recovered. It might have died in Alia's Keep anyway, where a bunch of creatures sit around in cages they're easily capable of demolishing.
Yeah, this one, I think we wound up kind of going through the level together and agreeing on it at the end of the day. This one, I think we agreed, right, that like we understood what the level designers were going for here, but they just kind of quote unquote failed because it wasn't implemented as well as it could have. It was I kind of got out of it what I wanted to, but also some of the enemies were acting kind of goofy, and I remember it kind of hurting my immersion as we were going through. So I agree.
There were plenty of other weird
Oh yeah, hey, welcome back, Kavak.
grating decisions made
Hope everything worked out okay.
in other areas too, like bonfires which spawn you in range of enemies, especially problematic since the character starts out vulnerable when they're teleported back after dying. If you die to the Lost Sinner, then decide to take a break when the loading screen comes up, you'll be killed by the archers at the bonfire over and over again, losing all your souls in the process. Just across the bridge from there, they also made the genius decision to place an important vendor in a room with 5 exploding enemies.
Okay, so I think for that first one, I actually just played through Dark Souls 2 up until I think I got to Iron Keep in vanilla. I think we looked at it on stream together, right? And when I played through that area, that's not exactly what happened. So first of all, in Scholar of the First Sin, they took those enemies out. So clearly they acknowledged that it was a problem or something that that fans were not happy about. But what happened for me when I respawned at that bonfire was that as long as I was at the bonfire, the enemies didn't attack me, but the moment I started moving around, they did. I think... No, I'd have to go back and check, but I think if you rest at the bonfire yourself, then your character goes into like the sitting near bonfire pose and then you're immune. But if you teleport to the bonfire, then I think your character will spawn standing next to it, and then they will detect you and attack you. So yeah, that's a pretty quirky one. I don't really know what to say in its defense. I guess I could say it helps keep you on your toes, but I don't know. If you want to say that that should count as a mark against the game, that's okay. I don't really have much to say about it. For this one, I mean, like, I really like this. It's a little annoying to have to deal with the spawns. It's actually not that bad, especially if you unlock the bonfire. These enemies are really easy to kill, and especially if you... I mean, they're dangerous, but if you learn their timing, and especially if you have a ranged weapon, they're really not that hard to deal with. And narratively speaking, they're here to kind of keep that prisoner in and keep him petrified and whatnot. So it adds a layer of like creepiness and mysteriousness and hostility to the whole area. I think it's one of those things where conventional wisdom dictates that you want to feel safe when you are near somebody who you're like spending currency on. You want to have your safe space to engage in inventory related stuff and trade items and listen to dialogue. So it's just like this deeply ingrained convention about game design that merchant areas are safe. But I don't know, like what's his name? Strayed is kind of like a creepy weirdo, and he might be a murderer or something. And he's just content to hang out in this awful prison that's full of like shambling corpses, and they are clearly put there to either be contained themselves but also to serve as a deterrent for other people. So they're doing storytelling, they're participating in the level in a meaningful way, and I don't think it's really that big of a hassle to try and I don't think that this area gets better if you take them out, right? If this is just an empty ass room and Straight is just like sitting in a corner like twiddling his thumbs, I don't think that this level will be memorable at all. It'll just be a fucking room, but even if you find some friction going up against these enemies, it's kind of iconic in my opinion. Let's see. Saria says they were simply being chill. Would you attack a guy if you saw him sit down to rest? Hopefully they're just chill like that. Yeah, just taking pot shots at you because they know that you're at the bonfire and you'll just regenerate. Isn't there? Oh yeah. In Sekiro, actually, there's that character. I forget what his name is, but he's like the immortal swordsman who hangs out near the shrine, and you can go and fight him over and over again, and because he'll keep coming back, he's like, you can use my body as like target practice, essentially. So maybe that was a foreshadowing Sekiro.
There's also the bonfire at Iron Keep, which forces your character to go through Belfry Sol because there's a small wall in the way.
Yeah, that one was really annoying.
It's obvious that the level designers didn't have the same priorities when working on Dark Souls 2.
No, I don't think that's true. I think they did have the same priorities, but there were constraints and there were some mistakes, if you want to call them that. I really don't think it's fair to assume intention like that. But I also understand where he's coming from.
I'd imagine the decision to allow warping right from the start of the game was made very early on in development, since every level is essentially a long tunnel leading to a dead end.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where he's coming from there as well. I wonder though if he would describe the it seems like a very kind of callous way of describing the levels, like a very dismissive way of describing the levels. I wonder if he would describe the Demon Souls levels the same way, because you could technically describe them all as long tunnels leading to a dead end, because that's literally what every level is, including like Stonefang Tunnel, right? But is that really fair? Doesn't that seem like a little bit of a disservice? Yeah, I don't really like that very much.
I've seen some people compare this to the level design in Demon Souls.
Oh, I forgot about that.
But honestly, that is an insulting statement to make about that game. Even in Demon Souls, the levels were often designed to loop back around on themselves to provide shortcuts. They were usually presented in a very natural way which matched up with the style of the world. In Boletaria, you unlock gates. In Stonefang, you activate a lift. In Latria, you open up locked doors.
Yeah, sure. There are definitely some shortcuts in Dark Souls 2. Not as many. Like, the level design is not necessarily as interconnected. But let's take Shrine of Amana as an example in Dark Souls 2. It is fairly linear overall, but there are definitely like branching parts of the level. There are parts of the level that kind of circle back, or at least allow for little divots in the path. And the level itself feels like it has its own theming, its own like acoustics, its own visuals, its own aesthetic across the board. Its own enemies, I think some of which are unique. Yeah, several of which are unique specifically to that spot. Its own interesting lore. So I guess it wouldn't be, look, Latria I think is one of my favorite, it is one of my favorite levels in any game ever. Like, I'm not going to say that Amana is comparable to Latria. Latria is like masterful. And Latria is, or freaking Amana is beautiful, but it doesn't match up. It just doesn't get anywhere near as great as, Latria does. If Shrine of Amana is an 8 out of 10 level, Latria is like a 20, right? Like, what I mean by that is that Shrine of Amana is doing pretty much everything it needs to do, and doing a lot very well, but Latria is just like transcended. It's just not even like, there's no point in even putting a number onto it. It's like a masterpiece. It's fucking amazing. But that all being said, I think that it's not to oversimplify what he's saying, but I don't think it's enough to just identify that the level mechanically doesn't have the same layout and the same like function in terms of looping back around and stuff like that. I think it's really important to focus on the aesthetic and the theming and the lore and everything like that too. I do think his focus tends to be a little bit more on the mechanical aspect of things. That's okay, but just to be careful to not like miss out on all the other aspects of the game as well. Let's see. Sorry says, I always hear such mixed things on Demon Souls. Yeah, it's quirky. I think it's very experimental, and it was, the game obviously that preceded Dark Souls, so they were still figuring out the formula, but they took a lot of risks and did things that didn't show up in future games that were quite interesting and compelling. It also feels a little bit more connected to like the Dungeons and Dragons style role-playing traditions, with the way that they handle like consumables and healing and stuff like that. And there's also more opportunities for you to kind of like not exactly get soft locked, but to get into kind of difficult situations if you don't plan accordingly. And then once you figure out the route to the game, like your second or third run through of the game, it'll probably take you like under 10 hours. If you know where you're going, know what you're doing at all. Whereas, obviously something like Dark Souls, I guess you could do it in 10 hours, but it would be more of a challenge in my opinion. There's a whole lot more going on. Yeah, it's really, really good. And Latria in particular is just like amazing. Be curious what else, what other things you've heard, what opinions that you've heard on either side.
The level design in Dark Souls 2 is not only lazy because it provides an incoherent world compared to Dark Souls 1, but also because it has less interesting layouts than the levels in either of the previous games. Many of the areas look interesting and large from the outside, only to be totally underwhelming when you actually go through them. The Tower of Flame is a small path with one short divergence leading to an optional boss.
Okay, I think it's fair to say that the Tower of Flame is not particularly compelling and elaborate and doesn't have all those, like, you know, looping back elements and stuff like that. That's fine. It also doesn't feel... It feels like less elaborate and less compelling than, for example, the... whatchamacallit? Than Boletaria, right? Even like the first section of Boletaria. But that being said, keep in mind that on the one hand, this is one of the first levels in the game, right? It's one of the first areas that players will go to. Some players might go directly here and miss the Forest of the Fallen Giants. And it's also sort of a transitional area. It's not, and maybe you think this is a detractor, but this, I think, is designed to kind of give you a hint at what the place was before, but it's like totally fallen into ruin, and really, it's just supposed to kind of guide you towards No Man's Wharf and towards the Bastille. And the Bastille and No Man's Wharf, to a lesser extent, are levels that do have that level of interconnectivity, and we went over that on stream together. They have the locks and the like opening pathways and branching areas. Bastille is really interesting because you can play it forward to back or back to forward depending on which entrance of the level you wind up in. There's multiple different kinds of keys and things to find. And so really, I find it kind of like overly easy when people say Dark Souls 2 has bad level design, and then they just pick the first fucking level, which is clearly like basically a tutorial and an interstitial space between other major levels, and then they use this to kind of validate their point without evaluating those other levels and how they stack up. Granted, Iron Keep is a late game level, and a lot of that is basically just a straight shot with a few little branching paths and stuff. There's not a whole lot of intrigue there. And you could probably go through the whole list and find other things, but other examples of levels being either compelling or not, depending on how you feel about them. Some are more linear, some are not. But like, just pointing to this, in my opinion, is like a tutorial plus, right? It's like the second semi-safe area with the first, like, I don't know, I think the Dragon Rider is probably easier than the Last Giant, but that's debatable. But then let's talk about the Forest of Fallen Giants for a second, right? There's like 4 different bonfires associated with that level. There's multiple branching pathways. There's the wall that you can blow up to unlock a little shortcut there. There's areas that are locked off until you get keys much later. There's NPCs that have little, you know, like Pate with his trap for you. There's multiple boss encounters with a sort of an interesting boss in the form of the Pursuer. There's a lot going on in Forest of Fallen Giants, and part of what goes on there also includes short loops and shortcuts and stuff like that that feel like sensible parts of the environment. So, and there is also like a sort of branching and interconnected like micro level design too, that I don't think is being acknowledged here. So, yeah, I don't know. I get where he's coming from, and I don't think comparing it to Demon Souls is like doing it any favors in terms of level design. But also keep in mind that Demon Souls had 5 levels, which meant that they... I mean, like, that's oversimplifying it, but they had like 5 biomes, right? So they had Boletaria, they had the swamp, they had Latria, they had Stonefang, and they had... the storm, I forget what that area is called, but with the like storm worshippers and all that. And granted, obviously, like the prison area of Latria and the swamp / area around the heart are very different in terms of what kind of enemies you're engaging in and the aesthetics and everything like that around you. But they have the same overall lighting, they have the same like acoustic palette, they have the same like overall like texture feel. You know, the aesthetic of the biome feels like it's all part of the same thing. And the same thing with Stonefang. You know, you got the color palette and the lighting palette and the acoustic palette and everything is established and consistent throughout the entire space, and with only minor variations. And Dark Souls 2 tried to do like 20 or something like that, right? I'm not going to go through the whole list, but if you just go through the game, there's a lot of different biomes with very starkly different visuals and aesthetics. And so I guess this kind of validates the point that he said previously about their priorities were clearly different. Yeah, I think they decided to focus a little bit more on variety and expanding the world and showcasing a bunch of different kingdoms and different locations within those kingdoms kind of overlapping, as opposed to having them more, I guess, to go broader rather than deeper. And if you feel like that detracted from the game overall, then that's okay. Like, you're allowed to have that opinion. Personally, I think that they should be commended at least for trying, even if you think that they failed in their attempt. I think their desire to try out a whole bunch of different styles and locations and aesthetics. I mean, even if you compare it to Dark Souls 1, there are several biomes in Dark Souls 1, but a lot of them are, you know, there aren't as many as Dark Souls 2, if I counted correctly last time, and there's more variety overall in Dark Souls 2. So it feels to me like they wanted to create a more vast palette, and maybe like some of their brush strokes got smeared in the process, if you'll accept that metaphor. I remember watching a stream and the guy playing was very angry, says Saria. It was rather dark. I think he was in some kind of cave, but he said hitboxes and hurt boxes were inconsistent, that AI read inputs. Yeah, so I think I understand. I wonder if it was Dark Side Phil. But yeah, I do think that there are some bugs with the hitboxes. We talked about that a little bit on stream. It's really just a few enemies, right? Like the Turtle Knights have a tendency to rotate way too much. Really what it is that enemies like the mimics and the pursuer and things like that have attacks that lock you into a grab animation. The way that they check for that is they basically like, it might actually be good to just pull this up. So like Dark Souls 2 hitbox, to see if I can find an example. So yeah, so you can see there, like the guy was like to the right of the Ivory King and then kind of teleported in, and that kind of sucks. Maybe we'll watch a couple more. Okay, so yeah. Oh, I kind of see. This is jumping around a whole lot. This is not what I was looking for. Maybe this guy. I don't really want to spend too much time on this in particular, but yeah, it's interesting. Let's see what happens with this. We probably need to listen to his explanation. Yeah, it looks like this guy's done some good research, so maybe go check this out afterwards. He's clearly like showing the wireframes and everything. My understanding. Let's see this for a sec. We're talking about Smelter Demon
with
anyway.
This AOE at its face butthole, am I right? Jesus Christ. All right, enough jokes. I promise. Grow up. Is surrounded by an AOE flame big enough that it's just about unavoidable with a melee build. And his jump attack turns his entire body into a ball of death, finishing with this AOE blast, which luckily doesn't stick around for long at all.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen this. I'd be curious to learn more about it, but it looks like there's some interesting information here. I'd encourage you guys to check it out. Title is Dark Souls 2 Hitbox Debate Ends Now. Channel name is Babe1 Babe2. And I'll check this out later as well. But what I was gonna say about the like the first one that we saw was generally what tends to happen. Yeah, like this. Let's see this clip from the Pursuer.
People talk a lot of crap on Dark Souls 2 hitboxes. Nobody has played this game
See
and
this
not
one?
screamed, "How did that hit me?"
Yeah, so I think what was happening there, and we talked about this previously, is that like when the Pursuer's sword gets activated and looks for something to hit for that grab attack, the hitbox that is doing that check is basically like a big wireframe around the entire sword, and your character has a wireframe around your character, and if any part of the hitbox on your character overlaps with any part of the hitbox on the sword, then it considers it to be a hit. Like the overlap counts as a hit event, and then it says, okay, there was a hit, and so now we have to put the character into the attack animation, and if your character's over here, then it teleports you over here. And so what it looks like it looks like the sword itself, like the tip of the sword, has a hitbox that extends all the way over here. But what's really happening is the sword just grazed you, and then it's like it handles that badly by teleporting you over here. Consider that, like, if it basically, if there was like a piece of feedback on the like a particle effect and like a sound that played when the blade clashed against you, and it wasn't just a like a teleport, but it was actually the blade like slicing a little bit of your HP off, and that felt fair and it was clearly reading, then I don't think people would look at that and say it was broken. I think it's not the fact that the hitbox is broken, it's the fact that, like, the way that the relationship between the hitbox and what happens after is inconsistent, and it feels like a bug, which it is, arguably. So I forgot how we got to talking about that. But oh yeah, for the input, yeah. So I can agree that there are certain things, like, if you go back to the stream where we were in the area right before the whole spider area in the Seldora, in Caves of Seldora, or whatever it's called. There are those like mimic chests. Actually, let me just see if I can find that box. Mimic. Dark Souls 3. Maybe this one. Oh yeah, here we go. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you can kind of see what's happening there, right? Like, it starts off. The mimic itself has a hitbox that responds to your inputs, to your attacks. But these blue wireframes, I think, are the places on your character's body that can be considered for an attack. And so the mimic moves forward, and these parts of its body are active. And if those parts overlap with you, then you're considered hit, right? So it goes forward a little bit, and then this this rather large cylinder, also, that's the other thing too, is that the hitbox cylinders don't necessarily conform to the mesh. In other words, because the actual character model has a lot of polygons, a lot of like individual, like I don't know, like roughness to the surface. If you actually made like a polygon for every single part of a character so that it, like, the mesh, like the hitbox fit the character perfectly, it would be super complex, and it would be very, like, computationally expensive. So it would be, especially if you had like lots of characters on screen, you can't really afford memory and CPU wise to have like perfectly fit mesh hitboxes on all the different characters. And sometimes you wouldn't even want to anyway for other reasons. But it's not very performant, and so usually there are these simplified like cylinders, and you can see, if you look closely, like there's one cylinder here, and then it's kind of overlapping with another one here, and they're basically just kind of like those little models that you use for like the little wooden dummies that you can use when you're like practicing art, like practicing poses and stuff. That's kind of what they look like if you take the actual character away. And then each one of those parts can be checked for an overlap event, and you can see that it's like now the cylinder on the outside is overlapping with your character cylinder, and the blue cylinder for your character doesn't fit your character, and the yellow cylinder for the mimic also doesn't fit the mimic as well. And the main reason for doing this is performance, but the second reason is because, especially in like multiplayer shooters, right, if the hitboxes were totally conformed to the character, it would be way harder to hit than you think. And so a lot of times the characters that you're shooting at will have approximated hitboxes that are a little bit larger than the characters, that just make it easier and more consistent to score hits. And so this is another example of that. Domo, by the way, is a great Dark Souls 2 channel from everything I've seen. He's put out a lot of stuff debunking some of Mahler's takes and some of People King's takes. And he also had like a sort of a... He's got a lot of great content. I'm kind of stumbling over my words for whatever reason, but I would encourage you to check him out. He's got a cat. He's got a cat as a profile picture. You can't say no to that. Okay, let's see what happens. Yeah, and then notice how your character like gets like straight up teleported, right? So let me just slow this down. Playback speed. So now the overlap event has occurred, and your character, the game needs to know where your character's gonna go to get the damage event, and they just, for whatever reason, didn't have time to, or didn't take the time to implement a move arm to mouth animation. So what happens is you get clipped by the arm, and as you're starting to attack, and then that registers, and then your character is just immediately slurped over, like teleported over. Notice that the arm didn't move, like there wasn't an animation that actually supported like telling the story of you getting slurped in by the enemy. You just kind of get nudged over, and that feels like a bug. And the shit that we saw on screen was worse than this on stream, because I was behind the mimic and I was just standing there. I wasn't even attacking him, and like his foot overlapped with me, and when that happened, my character zoomed right to his face because there was no like impale with foot, grab with arm, and then bring over to mouth animation. It was literally just a teleport, and that's why it felt like so buggy, right? And now you're just kind of stuck. Let's take a look at this one, and then I'll catch up on chat as well. So let's see. Chest opens up. So it looks like there's also, maybe what's actually overlapping is this sphere. Like if you touch the sphere at all, so any part of your character touches any part of the sphere, you might be pulled in. Let's see. Yeah, so you turn around, you start to attack. Oh, and it's actually visualizing the collision event right here. So here's where the overlap happens, I think. Oh no, that's where the hit happens, and that's where they're triggering the particle effect associated with the hit. You can kind of see the spark happen. Where does the actual... Okay, so he hits the enemy. That registered, and I guess it's registering off that sphere. And then this frame is where he's considered grabbed. So it looks like the capsule, the back of the capsule for the right arm of the mimic is overlapping with the bottom of his foot. And then that causes him to, in the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, just teleports him directly, and also like rotates his character too, because he's facing this way, and then he rotates around, like spins around, and now he's facing forward. So that, you know, again, nothing with the hitboxes here is broken per se. The hitboxes are doing what they're supposed to do. There are these big cylinders that are, I think the reason why they're bigger cylinders on the outside and smaller ones on the inside is that the bigger ones are specifically like checking for overlaps with players, whereas the ones on the inside are probably more for like hits or hit detection physics and stuff like that from the player. But yeah, it looks like there's way more space between the player and the hitboxes than there actually is, because visually in game you're not going to see all this, so you'll just be seeing the enemy's elbow, and the enemy's elbow will be like a foot away from your leg, and there's no narrative justification for why the elbow should cause your fucking guy to teleport to the mimic's mouth. Under the hood, code-wise, this is working as intended, but it's just not supported at all by the like cosmetic aspect of the game. And so all this is just to say that, like, yeah, anybody who experiences this has every right to be frustrated. This really sucks. It feels like the game is lying to you, and it can totally ruin an otherwise cautious like play session. So it feels bad. It feels really bad. Yeah, I won't really defend this other than to say sometimes people run out of time to make games. Anyway, sorry, it says I can't hear Mimic without thinking FNAF anymore. Oh, means I can get in there and make a FNAF style game. Yeah, well, this is actually have you not heard the development side name for these things is Springtrap. This is actually Scott Cawthon was playing through Dark Souls and got his inspiration for fucking Five Nights at Freddy's, which is in the same universe, by the way, and I will defend that. I will die on that hill. Kavak says, how do you talk so much without hurting your throat? When I stream, my throat ends up hurting quite a bit for a few hours after. Honestly, it does hurt a bit. I have water with me and I try to drink regularly, but I sometimes forget. And also, I don't know if this helps actually. I'm just like racking my brain, but I used to sing and I used to do like death metal vocals, and so I have some experience doing like vocal practice, vocal warm-up. I don't really do vocal warm-up for the stream itself, but like I can kind of pace myself and then lean into it over the course of the stream, and that kind of helps. But like I do have my limits. Like the last stream I did on Sunday was 4 hours, and by the end of it I was basically talking like this, and I was like, I want to keep going because I like talking to you about Naruto, but I gotta go. Like I do feel the tension. Like right now, if I focus on it, I do feel a little bit of. It almost feels like I just did like a light set of weights or something like that, to use a vague analogy. So I'm not immune to it for sure. But it does get easier over time as well. It's just like, man, it's just a muscle, man. You got you gotta. I'm sorry, I couldn't even keep a straight face. No, but like you can get used to it over time. I probably honestly am not as healthy about it as I should. I should take more breaks. You can kind of hear probably even now there's like a little bit of raspiness, especially if I'm not talking as loud. But yeah, I guess you should be doing this anyway. Everybody should be doing this anyway because it's fucking awesome. Do some death metal vocal warm-ups like once or twice a week, and learn how to do some like basic screaming. If you need an example, I think this is a good beginner song that everybody can pick up pretty easily. All right, check out what this guy does over here. One of my favorite songs. Might get copyright, but whatever. So if you can do that, then you should be fine on stream. This guy's fucking awesome, by the way. At least his music. I don't know him as a person. Yeah. Totally Kavak says they could have just made a different animation for the garb, or for the for the grab. If the mimics did a horizontal 360, that would have been so much better. Plus, it's not that weird looking since mimics are very dexterous. Yes, absolutely. It's just a mismatch between like the intended like function under the hood and the way that that's kind of communicated to the player. I don't think there's anything wrong with enemies having an attack where if you touch an enemy at all, you're basically boned. But you have to sell that in a way that feels fair and consistent, and they just didn't achieve that with the way that the hitboxes are, the relationship between the hitboxes and the animations. I like your idea of having it be like a 360 attack. Like, let's say the mimic like sticks out its tongue and then it spins around in a circle, and then if it hits anything while it's spinning, then, you know, they could still even keep the teleportation thing, and like even if they don't have time to do the animation fully, but they just kind of like slurp your character over to the enemy's mouth. But that will I think go down better for players. Players would be more willing to look at that and be like, it's a janky animation, as opposed to this whole thing is fucking broken, right? Oh, I missed some of the stuff you said before. Oh yeah, thanks for the reminder. Sometimes I can lose track. Let me roll up. Hate doesn't trap you. He specifically warns you of the trap. Oh yeah, that's right. I think in my head, me saying he traps you was like I was summarizing all of those words and being like, goes through the whole sequence where you are trapped in that area, and then those enemies come out and you have to fight them, and then you go back and talk to him. But you're right, he doesn't deceive you, he doesn't trick you. I did misrepresent that, so thank you for correcting me there. I appreciate that. Treasure in there for certain, but the entrance locks from behind. Yeah, and then he also gives you a similar kind of advice in Earthen Peak, where he points you towards treasure, and then once you go get it, he's like, doesn't he say something along the lines of, you can have it because this treasure hunting life is like too serious for me, it's like beyond me or something, and then he gives you his equipment. Am I remembering that correctly? Sorry, it says throat weights John is the neck of Goku in that one image. Yeah. So every day I put a thing on my neck that makes it better. Pretend I said something smart. I'm gonna get a glass of water. I mean, to be fair, Goku's neck is cracked in like every image. Kavak says, I think you missed. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, now that maybe I'm just like more conscious of it now, but it is a little bit sore, my throat at the moment. Also, part of why is that I haven't been I just need to hydrate more. Hydration really does help quite a bit. Drink less soda. That's something I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Aldia's Keep has a nice entryway, then turns into a single long corridor with a few small side rooms. Drangleic Castle is a
I don't think that's quite fair, but that's fine.
series of narrow...
Okay. I will aspire to the thick neck Goku. I'm trying to think of, there's some like anime meme where a character has like a belt around their neck and then they squeeze and the belt like pops off and breaks, but I didn't feel super confident wading into a joke about putting a belt around. It felt kind of uncomfortable, so I was just like, eh. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, so here's one example of something that's helped with me in the past when I've done like metal vocals, is if you you inhale and you inhale until your lungs basically feel full, like maybe 90% full, and then you hold your breath like, right, and you just kind of hold it in like that, and then you do little sips in, so like, I'm over exaggerating, but basically like that, right? You sip in a little bit and you hold it for a couple more seconds, sip in for a little bit and then hold it for a couple more seconds, and then you like slowly exhale. You just do that a few times. That kind of helps build your lung capacity. Now, obviously, don't do it to the point where you're making yourself uncomfortable. You're not trying to pop along or anything like that, but you just kind of like bring it in, and you like put your shoulders back and your spine back, and you just kind of hold it in, and then over time that helps you build a little bit of lung capacity. It also just opens up your chest and makes your chest feel like more comfortable while you're talking. So it's good even if you don't do any singing or anything like that. It's just good to do it once in a while, I think, to kind of open up your chest chakra. but seriously, it does help. Kavak says, Pate, there's treasure this way, but I have a bad feeling about it. I don't quite have the guts myself. Well, good to see that you survived. Perhaps you're more rugged than I thought. In any case, the treasure is yours, since you went ahead and took the leap. Yeah, I'm remembering that now. Cool. I appreciate you sharing that. I can never remember exactly what he said, but it's he does seem to have this wistful air about him when he's telling you to go get it, right? Sorry says, sounds like something that would happen in Baki. Before the guy reveals the belt won't make it hard for him to breathe, but instead inflate his muscles and grant him access to 100% of his brain. Yeah, isn't like, I think we talked about Baki before, right? That or maybe it was Konakun who was telling us that like they have some very unexpectedly crazy like actual multiversal stuff that happens later with like the raw power of like sweaty pecs is tearing holes in reality or something like that. Like it's really, really crazy. That'd be a lot of fun to look into at some point.
Nonsensical hallways. Contrast that with the Castle of Anor Castle, then turns into a single long corridor with a few small side rooms. Drangleic Castle is a series of narrow, nonsensical hallways. Contrast that with the Castle of Anor Londo, which was...
Okay, I think it's pretty doo-doo to use the technical term to describe. It isn't that a little unfair? Isn't it a little reductive to just say that Drangleic Castle is just a series of nonsensical hallways? I mean, you're really gonna exclude the like the room with all the acid and the dragons belching acid, like those little statue things. You're really gonna not talk about the painting of Nishandra. You're really not going to talk about the masks that kind of spit toxic arrows at you. You're not going to talk about the way that you see more and more of the castle below you as you get higher and higher up. You're going to talk about Wellager. You're not going to talk about the Cyan Knights or the I forget if the what enemies they had in that big area where you get like the Forbidden Sun or whatever. But there's a lot of different areas. There's a lot of different things in them, a lot of different enemies that you encounter. You're not going to talk about the fucking Ruin Sentinels in that like endless gauntlet. That'd be something you could complain about. Like it's kind of challenging area. I don't know. Shit like that it just kind of comes across to me as he was fed up with the game and just kind of wanted to move on. And I get it. That's fine. But I don't think that that's a fair assessment. And the problem is if you make statements like this, build a platform, then people start to trust you, and then that sentiment gets spread and unfortunately colors other people's perceptions of the game. So I don't think it's very fair, personally. I think it's pretty Castle Drangleic is very iconic, and describing it that way, even if it's hyperbole, it just seems unfair to me. Anyway, Kavak says, if you don't mind, after the stream, could you DM me that lung capacity thing? I want to give it a try. Yeah, sure. Let me pull up Discord and let me write you a message just in case I forget. Okay. Reminder, lung capacity workout thing. Yeah. If you don't hear from me by the end of the day tomorrow, have a bit of a busy day tomorrow, but feel free to poke me and remind me. And I'd be happy to help with that if I can. I'll see if I can actually find the video that I learned it from originally.
Which was by no means perfect, but actually had some rooms to explore like a castle should.
Yeah, you can explore stuff in Drangleic, come on.
The only shortcut I can even remember from Dark Souls 2 was kicking over a tree in Huntsman's Copse, which turns out to be totally unnecessary anyway since there's a bonfire placed right next to it.
Yeah, I will say that this one was completely unnecessary and really silly. Especially since there's another bonfire like 10 feet away. I really think it's not fair to say that there weren't other... I mean, what he said was that he doesn't remember other bonfires in the... other shortcuts in the game. There are plenty of other shortcuts in the game. But they're, I guess, not as memorable as some of the ones in Dark Souls 1. That's totally fine. And, you know, they're more contained as, like, they're more like little conveniences that help you navigate around a small section of the game more quickly, as opposed to, like, these big, eye-opening, like, oh my god, I'm all the way over here. I didn't know this connected to that. You know, like, the game doesn't really have moments like that the way the Dark Souls 1 does. And I definitely sympathize with missing those. Buck says right out, oh yeah, no worries.
Even given the opportunity for a good, well-placed shortcut, the designers neglected to place one. The same bonfire in Huntsman's Copse is directly below the bridge which leads to the area boss. There could have easily been a ladder placed here to kick down in order to provide a shortcut.
Yep, I think that's a great idea.
But apparently they would rather have you run all the way back around instead. Just think about how baffling this all is. Huntsman's Copse starts with a bonfire, then opens a shortcut directly to another bonfire, then neglects to open a shortcut to the boss area.
Yeah, and it gets even worse in I can't remember exactly how it's set up. I don't remember. Why am I Grand Archives? Sorry. I'm trying to see if I can remember, but I don't think I'm going to be able to find it. There's a situation in Dark Souls 3 where you wind up, he's gonna like run through the actual level. So this bonfire right outside of the the Grand Archives in Dark Souls 3 is right outside the entrance. But then there's another one that's literally like 50 feet behind it that spawns when when you beat the boss of the area, the Pilgrim Butterfly and Dragon Slayer armor. And then there's another one either right in here or like somewhere else that's really nearby. So you wind up getting 3 bonfires within like a minute walk of each other, and it's like really, really silly. And I'm sure nobody... It's one of those things where it's like, on the one hand, you don't want to oversimplify things and say like there's no reason for it to be this way, because we have no idea what happened during development, like what kind of quirks of the engine were in place to make this happen. So I'm just kind of trying to speculate here a little bit, but all of the enemies, the boss enemies in the game, spawn a bonfire when they die. And so if there was already a bonfire here, you would just say, okay, well, why don't we take the bonfire out and then just have the one spawned by the enemy, and then that will be the only one in the area when the enemy spawns. The problem with that is that the problem with that is that if the level was designed previously such that there was another way to get into the level without fighting that boss, or there's some other variable that might result in that boss not being defeated, then we might need a bonfire there for safety. And then we would think, oh, just turn the bonfire on and off, or like remove it from the level, depending on whether or not that other boss exists. But that might actually be really difficult to do depending on how the level archetype is set up. You would think you could just drop the thing in the level and be done with it, but maybe the level only supports like one per area, or maybe if you set the level up with it that way in the first place, then you build other things around it in the level, it's really hard to remove. And so you get into these situations where it's like, where you could say, okay, let's have the Pilgrim Butterfly boss just not spawn a bonfire because there's one already there. But then if like the archetype in code of every boss is that they must spawn a bonfire, now you have to create like a custom version of the boss archetype in code, or class rather is the term for it, and then give it an exception. And then if you make changes to bosses in general in code, well, then is that going to propagate to the exception that you made, and is that going to create other problems? And so sometimes you just get to like a situation where there's a very, very, very obvious problem that nobody wants and everybody wants to fix it, but because of all of the little knock-on effects that have been accumulated over years, now there's no way to fix it easily without risking everything else, and you just have to ship it. And it sucks. Like, nobody wants to do that. And I think sometimes it's tempting as a consumer, myself included, to look at something like that and be like, oh my god, what were they thinking? Like, seriously, what were they even thinking though? Like, how could they not fix this? And it's like, well, because they fucking shit's hard sometimes. But no excuses. They should have fixed that before they send it out. I'm like, yeah, they should have. Yep, they should have. And also, so sometimes it's just challenging. So I don't really expect gamers to, myself included, to really be patient with that, because at the end of the day, it breaks immersion and it makes things less fun and compelling, and so it's a valid criticism. And also, now that I've kind of like been in the kitchen, so to speak, I know that they're aware of the problem. Like, nobody at fucking Fromsoft was like, oh my gosh, how did 3 bonfires show up here? I've never seen that before. Everybody was fully aware, and if they didn't fix it, in all likelihood, it's because of some like scheduling nightmare or some other kind of catastrophe that happened, and they just ran out of time. It sucks, but that's what happens. Saria says, I always find it so cool hearing you think about things. Oh, thank you. From a design perspective, because you actually have the experience to think about it in a way that people like myself can't. Very thankful, to be honest. Oh, thank you very much. That's really genuinely wonderful and encouraging to hear. I hope for any game dev friends that might be listening that I'm doing a good job of representing things. You know, obviously, just like any other category of thing, all game devs, we're going to have our own perspectives and experiences. The games that we work on and the types of teams that we work on are going to be different. I don't speak for the whole industry. I can only speak for, you know, my own experiences. But it's been quite interesting to see how my relationship, like, I've been playing games since basically since I could hold a controller, and my experience as a gamer has changed permanently based on how I've learned to make games, and the inverse is also true. Like, as I develop games, it changes the way that I play them, and it's really interesting to me to see to try to switch my brain, I guess, from like gamer mode to developer mode. Sometimes I can succeed and sometimes I can't, but either way, I guess like if I had to say like what the biggest lesson that I've learned from gaming over the past 10 years is, or even just from trying to make anything at all, it's that no matter how much you know about something, no matter how much you think you know about something from an outside perspective, all of that changes like completely the moment you start to do something. In other words, when I wasn't really working on games all that much and I was just watching a lot of critiques, I thought I really understood game design deeply, and I could basically pick apart and critique and tell you everything about any game because I was a master game analyst or whatever. A bit conceited, I suppose, but that's how I thought at the time. And then I got back into making games, and within like 6 months I was like, oh shit, okay, I get it now, right? Like, all of this stuff that I was complaining about, yes, there's still problems. Yes, I'm a very, very, very smart and special boy because I can notice all the bugs. But at the end of the day, like, this is why this shit happens. And that was sort of an insight that I didn't have before. And if I could go back in time and, you know, talk to Matthew as he's making this, like, the one piece of feedback I would give, the same thing to Feeble King and to Mahler, is just like, please don't assume developer intention, and please also, more especially, don't assume malicious developer intention. Because really, yeah, some of us are lazy. I've been lazy at times. Some of us are like petty and frustrated, and we get irritated with our consumer base or whatever. But we're all gamers, we're all geeks, we're all nerds, and we want to make stuff that other gamers, geeks, and nerds, often ourselves included, want to play and have fun with. If you think we failed at that, then that's fine. Like, we need the feedback. We can't grow and continue getting better unless we get feedback. But at the same time, you know, fucking all these narratives around the game developers didn't care, this isn't level design, this is just lazy, the game devs want to like laugh at their players, and all that stuff is just like, I mean, come on, man. I know from being on both sides of the fence, so to speak, how that feels as a gamer, to feel like you spend $60 on something and then the developers turn around and give you the middle finger. I know how that feels. It sucks. But like, vast majority of developers don't want that, and they know, they are aware of the problems that you are experiencing, and they experience them too, because when they are done working for the day, they pick up the controller and they start playing games too, and they feel the same way you do. So at least that's my perspective. So I will turn the thanks back to you, Saria, and for anybody else who's come to the stream and checked it out and engaged in the conversations. Just like, I am very grateful to be able to hear what your perspectives are on games, and to hear what you think of and what you might be curious about in terms of game development process. If you have any questions or any specific things you'd like to know, whether that's like my own experiences or how I can only guess at some of these things, but how I think some of the problems are solved or approached or whatnot, strategies that we try to use to fix things, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. Mostly my expertise is on like gameplay scripting and specifically like sound stuff, so I'm not going to be able to talk much about lighting and about texture work and things like that, but I've done some programming, I've done some a lot of yeah, like I said, like level scripting, so stuff like blueprints, if you're familiar with, in Unreal and Kismet, and like Playmaker in what's it called, in Unity, things like that, where you're basically like setting up logic for levels and characters and stuff like that. So hopefully that can be helpful. I can't really talk about what game it is, but somewhat recently I worked on something that was like sort of a futuristic racing game too, and I spent like a few months doing the like setting up the audio for when the car, these like let's pretend they're like the cars in Rocket League or something like that, right, where they're like kind of drifting around and banking and turning and flipping and stuff. That was super fun, man. Just like getting to kind of tinker with the engines of these little virtual like spaceships. Really cool. But yeah, so I can speak more to that stuff and more to the overall, like, you know, I've been on development teams that have just been starting out and just been trying to put together their initial ideas through the crunch and through to the end and the shipping, and so I can talk about what my experience was at the different points in development. I can't really talk about anybody else's, but I'm happy to share mine if that's helpful. Okay.
Instead, there should have
I
been...
could have just said fucking thank you and kept with the fucking video, but you encouraged me, so.
And only one bonfire at the start, and a shortcut placed at the bridge. It's so close to being designed the same way as the previous games, but just isn't for some reason. It's not...
I like that he said for some reason and not for no reason. That in and of itself is great. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking.
Not just the level by level design which suffers in Dark Souls 2 compared to other installments. It's the accessibility of different areas and the placement of many items too. This is another reason why comparisons between the design of Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2 are insulting to the former. In Demon Souls, once the player finished the first stage of Boletaria, they then had 5 levels immediately available for them at any point. Each level had different pros and cons. There were incentives to go to any of them, except arguably the swamp, but even then the player isn't blocked from exploring the swamp if they wish. Item placement in Demon Souls was carefully balanced to give each world a reasonably fair share of useful items which players would eventually be aware of for subsequent playthroughs. Dark Souls 1 attempted to carry on this legacy, but did a somewhat worse job. There were several areas available right from the start, but not as much incentive to go to them.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm interrupting to acknowledge what is being said. I want to let him finish his point before I respond.
That said, the placement of items was still pretty well considered, and some players might opt to go straight through the Catacombs or Blighttown at the start to acquire certain items. In Dark Souls 2, Majula only opens into 2 locations at the beginning, but the sad thing is it actually connects to 5. The Grave of Saints, Huntsman's Copse and Shaded Woods are all sealed off until the player completes at least some of the other areas or gathers up around 12,000 souls to buy the cat ring.
Okay, hang on. I'm just gonna let him keep going.
There's no good reason why this should be the case other than
There we go. No good reason.
trying to ensure inexperienced players end up starting on the right path.
Okay, so if I understand I want to make sure that I try to steal man or at least summarize the arguments that are being made and then raise my objection. So, Demon Souls, the appeal of Demon Souls was that once you started up the game and went through like the little initial tutorial area, then the game would open up and you would have 5 different levels to go through. That's mostly true, except of course, the levels will be blocked off. Like you won't be able to progress past a certain point in Boletaria until you've gone and beaten one of the major bosses in one of the other areas. But otherwise, yeah, you can kind of pick and choose which way you want to go. He said that you'd be incentivized to varying extents in any given area. Like there are different things you could do in any area if you wanted to. So you could basically, apart from the swamp, pretty much choose whatever level you wanted to go to first and then go and do that level. Sort of. I think I agree with that overall, but at least in my 4 or 5 playthroughs of the game, I find that depending on what character class I am playing, there is really there are certain areas that are just like really miserable and slow and not really all that engaging to go through at first. You have the freedom to go through them and to explore them and to try things out. That's fine. But the idea that each one of them is sort of like symmetrically laid out so that you have a relatively even amount of items so that no matter where you go, you can basically be fine. That's not the case, at least in my experience. There is a lot of asymmetry between the different spaces, but it's also a logical asymmetry, meaning that if you are the sort of character who really wants to get some items to upgrade a physical weapon, makes a lot of sense for you to go to Stonefang, because even though the enemies there are resistant to physical damage, if you can find a way around that, you can get a lot of, first of all, you meet that blacksmith, but then you can also get a lot of like mining stones and stuff like that to help upgrade your weapons. Similarly, if you go to the Shrine of Storms, there's some stuff there that's more useful for a caster. I mean, there's like that scimitar that's like a magic scimitar that you can get early on that that is beneficial. Latria as well has like more magic oriented things, but of course there's a lot of really dangerous stuff there as well. So you have to, I guess, kind of go to each level and then consider what's best for your character and consider the pros and cons and take risks and experiment and probably die a lot and then gradually kind of craft your own route, which I think is really, really cool. I think that is a strength of the game. I think its flexibility is great and is an asset. From a design standpoint, it is really hard to balance that, especially if the levels that you have are vast and varied and have a lot of different types of enemies and are extensive and stuff like that, and that they kind of all spiral off into different like multiple levels kind of attached to one another. The broader the scope of those levels, the harder it is to balance and ensure that people are getting an evenly paced set of rewards regardless of where they go. Think about Elden Ring, for example, right? If you happen to miss the whatever that area, why can't I remember the name of it? The raining area that kind of looks like Australia. That's like south of Limgrave. Area that's like the Weeping Peninsula, is that what it's called? If you miss that area, which has like important healing and resource upgrades for you, and just wind up going to, I don't know, Caelid first, or to the castle Stormfang, you're going to wind up coming back to the Weeping Peninsula and just absolutely fucking steamrolling everything. Like, imagine you did go to Caelid first, or I guess Caelid is a better way to say it. Caelid, and clear everything out there and had a miserable time, but managed to level up and get really strong, and then go to Stormfang you'd be way overpowered and you would kind of like undermine the experience for yourself. And I've heard reviewers saying that this is exactly what happened. But also, like, if you go to Caelid first and you miss out on those healing items, then you're going to be having a miserable time because you're going to be like, why isn't this game giving me healing? Like, what the fuck? Yeah, there's a couple of chapels or whatnot where you can get tears, but at the same time, or like golden seeds or whatnot. But still, you're missing out on some very important stuff that is going to make your life more miserable without it. And so the game is trusting you to kind of, I think, poke out and do like little, what's the word for it? Heuristic attempts at different areas and collect a little here and then kind of pull back when it gets too much and collect a little over there, pull back when it gets too much. And that is great for a certain kind of gameplay style, but it's risky because it means that if somebody decides to commit to one of those paths instead of just like going back and forth across a heuristic, then they can wind up totally fucking up the balance of the game for themselves. They can wind up going through an entire area and being like, and having sort of a miserable time because they don't have the resources or assets they need, but then overcoming it and then going to a different area and being like, well, now I'm just getting all this shit for free. What the hell? Why didn't I have this when I needed it previously, right? You are putting a lot of trust in the player's hands to implicitly just understand your design and figure out and have like this, oh, okay, I get what you're getting there. Okay, I see what you're putting down kind of relationship, and then figure it out, which is awesome. I actually really, really love that design. And I also understand why, especially as you branch out and make a game that is wider with more varied areas with all kinds of different types of enemies, that's more sprawling or whatever in its, not in its like forks or whatever, but in terms of how long each individual fork goes, you might want to move away from that design and keep things simplified at first, because if you ensure that like the players for the first 5 hours of the game instead of the first 2 hours of the game have access to a few healing upgrades, a few weapons, a few upgrade stones, a merchant, an armorer, etc., that you can basically make sure that no matter, like, after that first few hours, the player can go nuts and they'll all at least have like a +3 weapon and like a +3 Estus flask, etc., etc., and have a couple of different types of armor. Then you let them off the leash and then they can go wild and make their own mistakes. I think that was what Dark Souls 2 is trying to do. I think maybe Matthew feels like they overcorrected. They limited you too much early on. But again, what I would ask people to consider is, what is the proportion of like hand holding early on in the game? What is the ratio of early on hand holding to freedom later on? So in Demon Souls, right, the game overall is like 20 hours long, and the first 2 hours are hand holdy. Dark Souls 2 is maybe 60 hours long, and the first 5 hours are hand-holdy. So functionally speaking, it takes you longer to get that sense of freedom. But then once you do, you have a more extensive playground in which to explore and be free than you do in Demon Souls. So as I'm thinking about it, as I'm kind of saying all this stuff out loud, I actually think that Dark Souls 2 still manages to retain the core of the Demon Souls design, even more so than the Dark Souls design, but it just kind of spreads it out a little bit more at first to kind of make sure you have a bit of a more like equalized playing field. I don't think that that's better or worse. I think the Demon Souls design is really bold and really cool, and I also think it's really risky, and it's a gamble. And for me, it paid off, and I respect that they took that gamble, and I also understand and respect why they decided to play the cards a little closer to their chest for Dark Souls 2. So hopefully that seems fair. Oh, Weeping Peninsula. Okay, yeah. I mean, I could have just Googled it, but then I'd have to like, what is this thing over here with all the letters and numbers on it? I don't want to mess with that. I'd rather just say more words. Clearly, I haven't said enough words yet. Okay, I'm going to keep going until the 3-hour mark, so I'm going to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so.
That might seem like a harmless compromise to make, but the Souls games are supposed to be a refuge from the crippling accessibility concessions many other modern games make.
Yeah, that's important, right? And that's what I was saying before about how that one ledge changed my life. And that's no exaggeration. Like, that one ledge that didn't have the blocking volume on it kind of shook me and woke me up from a stupor that I was in terms of game design at the time. And I think it sounds like I'm exaggerating. It sounds like I'm just telling tall tales or whatever. But no, I legitimately mean it when I say that that fucking ledge changed my life. This thing over here changed the way that I look at and play and make games. Like, no exaggeration. So it's important. And there was this crippling concession, as he says, that had been being made to games overall. And that is why I think some people are so defensive, not to use that term dismissively, but like really defensive of any change made to the original Dark Souls. In addition to, yes, it does overlap with some of the like Gamergate toxic masculinity stuff, but that's not what I'm talking about. Dark Souls was a like bright beacon of light in the fog of game development at the time, and it represented a return to, I guess, a more classic style of game design, but also a step forward towards a more bold relationship between the design of the game's mechanics and its story, and like everything kind of being this cohesive whole, and not making compromises to that for difficulty, let's say. I think he says accessibility, but I'll say difficulty. And when something like that comes along once in a while, and it kind of is a masterpiece, not just for what it is, but also for what it represents for the industry, you want to protect it. You want to keep that one safe, right? You don't want that to get watered down and become a victim of the same shit that was that led to it being such a beacon of hope, so to speak, to be a little hyperbolic with it, in the first place. And so I totally understand that. It's just unfortunate that it then got kind of co-opted into this whole like bullshit narrative of, well, the games industry overall is getting corrupted by feminist journalists, and they want to make games easy so that every gamer is a little baby who never has to work hard in their life, and games should be about challenge and overcoming adversity and nothing else. And so if you're having fun with a game, then you're a cuck, whatever the fuck they said, you know, like all of that stuff. And then they take and let me underscore this, my Dark Souls 2, my personal Dark Souls 2, and they have to slander it in such an awful way. That I simply can't stand for. Sorry. Kellogg says, sorry if I asked this before, but do you plan on playing Lies of P? Yeah. I'm currently playing the DLC, and it has some of the best level design I've experienced in the game. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I played like the base game. I really enjoyed it. It also kind of kicked my ass, not gonna lie. But I think it has a lot of stuff that was really good, really smart. Particularly, I loved the weapon like handle swapping system, where you could basically make custom weapons with custom movesets. It was very intuitive, very flexible, very compelling. A lot of the enemy design, the sound design, the world design was really compelling as well. I did feel, actually, I would be inclined to describe the level design kind of the way that Matthew was describing the level design for Dark Souls 2. I found a lot of the areas to be very strict and very linear, with not a whole lot of exploration to the side. Apart from some areas, like I remember an area that was like outside of a factory, and there were like these giant crane monsters that were kind of, or like mechs with like giant wrecking ball cranes that were kind of wandering around this quote unquote swamp area with all these like discarded mannequins and whatnot. There are places like that that had plenty of exploration and branching pathways. That whole factory as well, where I think the first time you see what are those creatures called, like the hero of the revolution, or something, like the titan of industry or something like that. The first time you see one, it's kind of like down in this sewer inside the factory, and that was a cool discovery, and that whole level definitely had like some branching aspects to it that were really compelling. But yeah, I have the DLC downloaded, actually. I haven't gotten to it yet because I just was doing Night Rain and then Deltarune, but I'm definitely down to check it out. Especially with your endorsement, I would be very curious to see what they expanded on for the DLC. That was their second game too of all time, right? So really, really impressive what that team pulled off. Genuinely awesome, and I want more. I would like a sequel. I won't go into spoilers, says Kavak, but like every little part of each area is different. It's basically impossible to get like, oh, awesome, okay. Barren Swamp and Puppet of the Future. Okay, yeah. I had the vague idea, but I couldn't remember the name. But yeah, that sounds great. I'm curious. So one of the things that I've been a little hesitant about the DLC, should I go back and play the base game and then like refamiliarize myself with it first, or can I just jump into the DLC and like it's a prequel, right? So it doesn't inherit my gear and equipment and stats and stuff like unlocks from the base game. I can just jump into a new session of the DLC without having to redo everything. But yeah, let's continue.
Dark Souls 1 allowed you to wander into New Londo or the Catacombs at the start, and trusted you would have the intelligence to go somewhere else instead. Dark Souls 2 doesn't seem to have as much trust in the player. None of the 3 blocked off areas are even that difficult. I'd say getting through the Catacombs in Dark Souls 1 is more difficult than any of them, so it's frustrating that these areas, and the items they contain, are locked away until later for no good reason.
I don't think it's fair to say they were locked away for no good reason. I understand the frustration though. And I think that with that being said, like, if you really break it down, you immediately have access to, I don't really think that the areas are locked off per se, right? Because you have access to the Forest of the Fallen Giants, and there are 2 bosses that you can fight in there. The Lost Giant, I think, drops exactly 12,000 souls, so you are guaranteed to have enough souls to pick up the cat ring from Shalquar, which means that you then immediately have access to the Gutter and the Black Gulch, which can lead you all the way to one of the major bosses. You then also have access to the Lost Bastille by going through the whatchamacallit, fighting the Pursuer and getting the Eagle to take you there. So you have access to another one of the major 4 bosses. If you decided to go through No Man's Wharf, you have access to like the Grave of Saints, the Hade's Tower of Flame, and then the little interstitial, I guess it is Grave of Saints, but little interstitial area that then leads you to the Lost Bastille. So you have the No Man's Wharf and you have the boss there, and then again get the Lost Sinner. If you even go through the first little part and beat of Hade and beat the Dragon Rider, then you have access to Lycia for 2,000 souls. She gives you access to the Huntsman's Copse, and that lets you get in and access the. I think the Huntsman's Copse leads to the Earthen Peak and then to the Old Iron King, so you can get the 3rd one there. The only one that's actually really locked off is the Shaded Woods leading to Drangleic Castle and all that, and you need a Fragrant Branch of Yore, and I think you get one after, like, pretty early on. Hang on, let's see. Dark Souls 2 Fragrant Branch of Yore. Scholar First Sin, what about the regular version? Needed to unpetrify. Location. Where's the in the base? Okay, so Harvest Valley. Okay, so you can get that one really easy. There's 2 in Harvest Valley. Gutter, Shaded Woods. Yeah, so you can get one in Sinner's Rise. Yeah. Okay, that's the one I was looking for. There was one right after a boss. So you can get access to Sinner's Rise pretty easily, and then that's the only thing that's locked off. So 3 out of the 4 bosses are available to you right from the start of the primal bosses, let alone all the other ones. And then the last one is locked off by an item that you can get within the first few hours of the game if you know what you're doing. I think that I understand where he's coming from, but I think that there's kind of a caricature that's happening here of the whole game is locked off for Little Baby, as Little Baby has their first like Goo Goo Gaga experience of Little Baby's game, and then once you graduate out of pull-ups, then you get to go play the rest of the game. And it's like not really true. You have more freedom than he's describing. Like literally you can go straight from Majula through to No Man's Wharf and to the Sinner's Rise and just like punch the Lost Sinner in the face and then take her stick and then immediately go straight to Rosabeth, give her the stick, and then go through and beat up the Duke's Dear Freya, and then use the souls that you got from those to go beat up the other 2. Like, you can beeline it and explore most of the game right away if you want to. You just have to take a little bit more time to I guess familiarize yourself with the way that they're planning out their route. And honestly, I think there's an argument to be made that that's more organic than just going back to a hub and like picking something off of a list, like going out to the Archstone and picking a destination and warping there. You know, you never actually get to physically move between the Nexus and Boletaria, or the Nexus and Latria, for example. You're always warping to other distant locations, so there is literally no transition between spaces. Matthew seems to not appreciate the janky and poorly implemented transitions between spaces in Dark Souls 2, which I understand, but they are at least trying to expand on the foundation made by Demon Souls by adding those transitions. Even if they quote-unquote failed, I think they should be given some credit for the attempt. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say. Let's see. If you're in New Game Plus, you absolutely do not go into the DLC. That would be nightmarish. Okay, I think I was in I don't think I've crossed over to New Game Plus yet. Even if you've already beaten the game and haven't gone to New Game Plus, the practice of going restarting will help. Okay, so it does kind of take your stuff from the base game over into the DLC. It's not like a completely separate thing. Okay, I'll give that a try. Will of going, I don't know what kind of drugs my autocorrect is smoking, but it better stop. How does autocorrect change from to will of going? I don't know, man. I think the AI is possessed. They're just trying to throw us for a loop. But I get what you're saying. I appreciate the info. So with that being said, now my throat is actually starting to get a little sore, so I think I'm going to call it a night. I really appreciate the conversation, and as always, please let me know if you have any follow-up thoughts or commentary or critiques or whatever. More than happy to keep the conversation going either in the comment section or in Discord. As for the stream schedule, I think I've been enjoying going through this. I want to start playing games again soon as well, so maybe do another stream of this and try and keep a bit of a brisker pace, and see if we can get through it in one, maybe two more streams at most, and then probably start with not sure yet, probably Clair Obscure on the gaming days. And then, so for the Sunday streams, I am going to be doing a part 2 of the Naruto debate critique this Sunday. And then I think, honestly, I'm kind of getting to the point where I've said what I wanted to say about Naruto stuff. I want to do one more stream about like data books and lightspeed arguments. But then I might take a break from that and do like a big Dark Souls 2 music stream one weekend instead of the Naruto stuff, and then kind of come back to it for fun when I like the research and the prep for the anti-skeptic stuff took a lot out of me in a good way. It was a lot of fun, but yeah, a little change of pace will be nice. So yep, Naruto Sunday, more Dark Souls 2 critique next Thursday, and then Clair Obscure in the near future. I hope you guys have a great night. And sorry if you hear this, please, take care. Take as much time as you need to recover. Best of luck with the recovery and with everything you've got going on. And best wishes to your family and to the animals as well. Okay, good night.